A black female soldier, dressed in full uniform, had a gun shoved in her face, right in the middle of the street, just because a cop saw her skin color as a threat. She raised her hands, calm and clear. "I'm a U.S. Army soldier, on my way to base." But he didn't hear that. He didn't see the uniform. He only saw a black woman, and then, boom. A single shot shattered the quiet morning, and the entire U.S. military snapped to attention. She didn't resist. She wasn't a threat, but she was still shot because of the color of her skin. 1 minute later, the Pentagon's phone lines lit up like a war zone, and this time they weren't staying silent. Think wearing a uniform protects you from prejudice? In America, your skin color can still get you killed. What state are you in? Don't think for a second there isn't a gun pointed at you, just for being born the wrong color. U.S. Army Sergeant Lisa Hall, clad in her crisply pressed uniform, had set out on what was supposed to be just another routine day. Her car hummed steadily along the tree-lined streets of Arlington, Virginia, as she mentally organized her day's agenda, unaware that her life was about to collide dramatically with fate. The rhythmic tapping of her fingers against the steering wheel synced perfectly with her favorite tune crackling from the radio, creating an oasis of calm inside her car. It was a calm that would soon be shattered. A sudden flash of blue and red lights erupted in her rearview mirror, pulling her back to the present with a jarring halt. Confusion twisted her stomach into knots as Lisa obediently guided the vehicle to the side of the road. The officer's silhouette, shadowy and imposing against the glare of the cruiser's headlights, approached with a heavy stride. Lisa rolled down her window and looked up with a steady gaze. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" Her voice, cool and professionally confident, masked the unease creeping into her veins. The officer studied her with a hard stare, his hand hovering suspiciously close to the holster at his side. "License and registration," he barked, bypassing any formal greeting. "May I know why I've been stopped, sir?" Lisa pressed gently, trying to adhere to the very protocols of courtesy and respect her military training demanded. His eyes flickered over her digital Army ID card, and stillness settled between them, heavy as the Virginia humidity. A tense silence hung in lieu of answers, pushing through the boundaries of procedural routine into something far more sinister. Seconds stretched achingly into eternity. Her heart drummed insistently against her ribcage, its rhythm accelerating with the officer's escalating hostility. The world around her narrowed, focused only on the officer's narrowing eyes and the slow, deliberate lowering of his hand toward his gun. "Get out of the car," he commanded, voice dipped in steel and suspicion. "I'm a serving member of the U.S. Army. I haven't done anything wrong," Lisa managed, steadying the tremor threatening to dislodge her composure. "Out! Now!" he repeated harshly, voice slicing through the morning air. With deliberate slowness, mindful of every movement, Lisa unbuckled her seatbelt, her hands held up in a gesture of compliance and peace. The officer's tension was palpable, every muscle taut with unspoken aggression. As she opened the door, the officer stepped back, his right hand gripping the pistol's handle with alarming intent. What happened next unfolded with brutal swiftness, a cascading sequence of actions impossible to recalibrate. The officer shouted once more, a command lost in a cacophony of fear and misjudgment. Lisa, complying, moved to retrieve her identification more clearly, unaware that this act of self-protection would be grotesquely misinterpreted. The officer's misstep into an abyss of prejudice catalyzed a fate rewritten in irreversible tones. The harsh report of the gun firing jerked through the air, its echo twisted with the piercing scream of bystanders witnessing a tableau of horror they would carry forever. Lisa staggered, disbelief soldered to her features. Her knees buckled against the asphalt, a searing, numbing fire spreading across her chest as the officer stumbled backwards in dawning, devastating realization. The scene suspended above the ground, heavy with a tragic gravity. A sobriety shattered the morning, the consequence of a colorblind uniform meeting the spectrum of racial frailty underpinning America's divided facade. 1 minute, 60 fleeting seconds that stretched beyond time to grasp intangibly at justice, accountability, and humanity. The ripple of the gunshot had pitched more than one life into turmoil. Already the calls had been made. The U.S. Army was on the line, their demand for truth stirring fiercely over the wires, ready to bridge or fracture whatever lay beyond this horizon of injustice. The bystanders around held their breaths, each heart a silent plea for justice. America watched, a live audience to another tragic episode demanding change. Somewhere in the digital ether, a comment thread exclaimed, "Where you watching from?" echoing the startled, raw reflections of a nation gripped by another injustice poised on the precarious edge of societal transformation. A black female soldier, dressed in full uniform, had a gun shoved in her face, right in the middle of the street, just because a cop saw her skin color as a threat. She raised her hands, calm and clear. "I'm a U.S. Army soldier on my way to base." But he didn't hear that. He didn't see the uniform. He only saw a black woman. And then, boom, a single shot shattered the quiet morning, and the entire U.S. military snapped to attention. She didn't resist. She wasn't a threat, but she was still shot because of the color of her skin. 1 minute later, the Pentagon's phone lines lit up like a war zone, and this time, they weren't staying silent. Think wearing a uniform protects you from prejudice? In America, your skin color can still get you killed. What state are you in? Don't think for a second there isn't a gun pointed at you just for being born the wrong color. U.S. Army Sergeant Lisa Hall, clad in her crisply pressed uniform, had set out on what was supposed to be just another routine day. Her car hummed steadily along the tree-lined streets of Arlington, Virginia, as she mentally organized her day's agenda, unaware that her life was about to collide dramatically with fate. The rhythmic tapping of her fingers against the steering wheel synced perfectly with her favorite tune crackling from the radio, creating an oasis of calm inside her car. It was a calm that would soon be shattered. A sudden flash of blue and red lights erupted in her rearview mirror, pulling her back to the present with a jarring halt. Confusion twisted her stomach into knots as Lisa obediently guided the vehicle to the side of the road. The officer's silhouette, shadowy and imposing against the glare of the cruiser's headlights, approached with a heavy stride. Lisa rolled down her window and looked up with a steady gaze. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" Her voice, cool and professionally confident, masked the unease creeping into her veins. The officer studied her with a hard stare, his hand hovering suspiciously close to the holster at his side. "License and registration," he barked, bypassing any formal greeting. "May I know why I've been stopped, sir?" Lisa pressed gently, trying to adhere to the very protocols of courtesy and respect her military training demanded. His eyes flickered over her digital Army ID card, and stillness settled between them, heavy as the Virginia humidity. A tense silence hung in lieu of answers, pushing through the boundaries of procedural routine into something far more sinister. Seconds stretched achingly into eternity. Her heart drummed insistently against her rib cage, its rhythm accelerating with the officer's escalating hostility. The world around her narrowed, focused only on the officer's narrowing eyes and the slow, deliberate lowering of his hand toward his gun. "Get out of the car," he commanded, voice dipped in steel and suspicion. "I'm a serving member of the U.S. Army. I haven't done anything wrong," Lisa managed, steadying the tremor threatening to dislodge her composure. "Out. Now!" he repeated harshly, voice slicing through the morning air. With deliberate slowness, mindful of every movement, Lisa unbuckled her seatbelt, her hands held up in a gesture of compliance and peace. The officer's tension was palpable, every muscle taut with unspoken aggression. As she opened the door, the officer stepped back, his right hand gripping the pistol's handle with alarming intent. What happened next unfolded with brutal swiftness, a cascading sequence of actions impossible to recalibrate. The officer shouted once more, a command lost in a cacophony of fear and misjudgment. Lisa, complying, moved to retrieve her identification more clearly, unaware that this act of self-protection would be grotesquely misinterpreted. The officer's misstep into an abyss of prejudice catalyzed a fate rewritten in irreversible tones. The harsh report of the gun firing jerked through the air, its echo twisted with the piercing scream of bystanders witnessing a tableau of horror they would carry forever. Lisa staggered, disbelief soldered to her features. Her knees buckled against the asphalt, a searing, numbing fire spreading across her chest as the officer stumbled backwards in dawning, devastating realization. The scene suspended above the ground, heavy with a tragic gravity. A sobriety shattered the morning, the consequence of a colorblind uniform meeting the spectrum of racial frailty underpinning America's divided facade. 1 minute, 60 fleeting seconds that stretched beyond time to grasp intangibly at justice, accountability, and humanity. The ripple of the gunshot had pitched more than one life into turmoil. Already, the calls had been made. The U.S. Army was on the line, their demand for truth stirring fiercely over the wires, ready to bridge or fracture whatever lay beyond this horizon of injustice. The bystanders around held their breaths, each heart a silent plea for justice. America watched, a live audience to another tragic episode demanding change. Somewhere in the digital ether, a comment thread exclaimed, "Where are you watching from?" echoing the startled, raw reflections of a nation gripped by another injustice, poised on the precarious edge of societal transformation. The sun, though still low in the sky, seemed to cast a harsher light as sirens continued to wail and the residential street morphed into a front-page scene of systemic failure. The echoes of urgent military communication could still be heard over the declensions of the crowd, a signal that the situation's barometer had reached a pivotal and explosive level. Inside the Pentagon, the atmosphere was electric, with a kind of urgency that spread through the chain of command like wildfire. Lisa Hall's name shot up the hierarchy with blistering speed, reaching the ears of those who held the reins of the nation's military might. Within an hour of the incident, senior officials huddled in a hushed conference room, the gravitas of the situation necessitating immediate and severe action. Colonel Graham stood at the helm of it all, his usually steady features drawn with an intensity that matched the mood of the room. "This is unacceptable. Sergeant Hall is one of our own. This is an attack on the uniform and everything it stands for," he declared, his voice a powerful rallying call that unified the shaking assembly of officials. A general across the table leaned in, eyes sharp, reflecting the flashes of digital displays detailing the unfolding nightmare in Virginia. "We need an official statement before noon. The Army cannot and will not appear passive in the face of this." The tension crackled like static between words unspoken, beneath the hard, unyielding surface of military structure. The unassailable truth that such incidents of racial misjudgment tore savagely through the protective fabric meant to uphold America's ideals, undermining the trust within the communities they were sworn to protect. Phone lines buzzed like a hive at the height of summer, voices melding in concert, a telecommunications symphony orchestrating a response that needed to be both swift and sagacious. It was imperative that the Army distance itself from the event, yet extend the full measure of its support to Hall's family and the fallen sergeant, lying still on the hospital gurney, fighting for her right to breathe. Colonel Graham turned to his aide, her fingers flying deftly over a laptop, preparing a draft statement. "Reiterate our commitment to racial equality and justice under the military umbrella," he instructed, his narrowing eyes seeing beyond the present moment to a wider narrative touching every corner of the nation. The aides and secretaries within the room followed orders with exactitude, their phones tethered to ear and hand, each relaying instructions, authorizing rapid correspondence, deployment, headlining media outlets, and social networks alike. The military stands firm against this brand of egregious conduct. We demand a thorough investigation, independent from local law enforcement, with full transparency. Sergeant Hall is not just a soldier. She is a representation of the values we strive to uphold. Her suffering will not be in vain. Across the continent, in makeshift rooms and open forums, people rallied around these bastions of digital dissemination, caught up in the churn of dialogues shaped by policy announcements and public reactions that illuminated phones and gripped communities with relentless fervor. Lisa's still form, her vital signs projected on multiple screens across the Army Medical Command, became a symbol of more than military pride. She represented the soldier within every community member, an embodiment of the undissolvable link between civilians and the quietly uniformed few who served, not only with purpose, but with honor. As doctors worked swiftly in a desperate bid to stabilize her, signs of faint, stubborn life emerged, triggering a fresh wave of optimism amid the cold, clinical process of biomedical repair, a metaphorical bastion against the pessimism of grim statistics and relentless media barrage. Colonel Graham, watching the emerging reports and gauging their impact, knew that the moves made this very morning, this damned, grim morning, would resonate far beyond those just in the room or those connected by a black and white report. The Army will not let Sergeant Hall become another statistic for the archives. Together, out there, lives need to be saved by this stance we take today. There was a resolute nodding around him, agreement reverberating, much like the shared pulse existing within the multitude, reading, retweeting, and responding to the Army's declaration. Now, beyond the simple outlines of era and error, the military establishment drew lines of action in indelible ink, reaching toward systemic justice, a courageous endeavor against the symphonic chaos of a raw and unraveling nation, keenly observed with the military precision of duty. The city of Arlington awoke to a palpable shift in its atmosphere, a current of fervor and defiance that swept through neighborhoods and crossed county lines. News of the shooting had erupted like wildfire, with Lisa Hall's name swiftly becoming the rallying cry for righteous indignation and demands for accountability. By dusk, sidewalks were pulsing with bodies moving purposefully toward the flashpoint of injustice, drawn by an unspoken obligation to bear witness and demand change. The crowd was diverse and determined, arms linked in solidarity, faces resolute as they took up banners and placards lined with stark declarations. Justice for Lisa. End racist policing. Accountability now. The marchers filled the streets in defiance of the evening chill, their breath mingling with chants that echoed against the crisp autumn air like a rhythmic heartbeat of resistance. Onlookers stood on porch steps and leaned against lampposts, their expressions ranging from supportive cheers to skeptical frowns. Yet even the hesitant couldn't deny the energy coursing through the throngs, a potent mixture of grief, anger, and determination that welded individuals into a collective force demanding to be heard. At the forefront of the march, Lisa's family stood shoulder to shoulder with veterans from her unit, their military decorum fiercely intact even in the face of raw emotion. Her mother, eyes red-rimmed but unbowed, clutched a photograph of her daughter, a testament to the proud soldier whose service uniform now bore bloodstains from her sacrifice. Her father, stoic and silent, radiated a somber authority that many found themselves aligning beside. As the procession made its way toward the courthouse steps, where speeches were to be made, impromptu debates erupted in shops and cafes about the deeper implications of Lisa's shooting. People argued passionately about systemic racism, evaluating the societal structures that enabled such tragedies and discarding rhetoric in favor of actionable compassion and understanding. Across the street, a small group of counter-protesters had gathered, their banners proclaiming a supposed support for law enforcement but essentially echoing a fear and misunderstanding that loomed over every step toward unity. But within the larger demonstration, compassion ruled over confrontation, and as the confrontation loomed, Lisa's story held a unique power to kindle dialogue and bridge divides. Her uniform still a symbol of protection and bravery amid the fierce storm of discontent. Leading the speeches, an outspoken community leader took the mic, his voice carrying through the amplified system. Lisa Hall stands for more than just a name or a rank. She represents the heart of a nation's armed forces and the dream of equality we must all protect," he declared, drawing nods and applause. He continued, "Let us not forget that her blood stains more than her uniform. It stains the very fabric of our society, and it is up to each of us to cleanse it. This isn't just about changing laws, but about transforming hearts." And the crowd responded with a unified roar, their shared momentum cresting like a powerful wave poised to crash against entrenched resistance. As speakers rotated, each adding their voice to the growing chorus of revolutionaries, it became clear that this was not just an isolated incident. The shooting of Lisa Hall was emblematic of a broader reckoning rippling across the nation. The march continued its relentless advance, reaching the steps of the courthouse as dusk shaded into night. Strategically placed lights lit up the gathering, bathing it in a soft glow that softened faces but hardened resolves. Cameras flashed, reporters our notes, and live streams captured every poignant moment for viewers across the globe. One by one, voices took the stand, each testimony a stitch in the growing tapestry of community struggle against systemic injustice. Soldiers spoke of service, civilians of safety, mothers of loss, and youth of a future yet unwritten. The narrative flowed seamlessly, a rallying cry that transcended individual grievances and converged into a singular demand for change, a world where uniforms of service did not warrant suspicion, but invited unwavering respect. The voices joined in harmony, crescendoing into a chant that echoed off courthouse walls and into the hearts of those within earshot. It was a promise, a sacred vow, to remember Lisa Hall not as a tragic casualty, but as a catalyst, a soldier whose ultimate battle had triggered a move toward unity and understanding in a nation caught in the throes of reckoning. As the crowd's energy waned, replaced by the night's quiet reverence, Lisa's family stood back to take in the scene. Her mother clasped the photo of Lisa tighter, a tear tracing her cheek like a solemn benediction over the gathered souls, illuminated by the rekindled hope of tomorrow. In their silent embrace lay the unwavering conviction that this tragedy, while devastating, would not extinguish their spirit nor diminish Lisa's legacy. As they turned to leave, promising to continue this march within their own spheres of influence, the crowd echoed their sentiment, demanding a world where justice was not defined by the color of one's skin, but by the content of one's character and action. Meanwhile, across counties and states, eyes were drawn to the unfolding vigil. Digital screens alive with commentary that brought people together from miles apart, asking the same question. How could this day not galvanize change? How could this night not create a new dawn? As the night stretched on, the gears of the media machinery churned with relentless vigor. Cameras flashed, capturing images of raw emotion and unwavering determination on the faces of those marching for justice. Reporters jostled for position, microphones angled toward the evening speakers, eager to capture every poignant soundbite that might define the day's headline. Inside the cramped and bustling newsrooms, editors and journalists scrambled to piece together the story that had suddenly seized the nation's attention. The harried tapping of keyboards orchestrated a digital overture, each keystroke contributing to the crescendo of narratives unfurling across screens, like a tapestry unfurling in real time. Army sergeant shot during traffic stop. "A nation reacts," screamed one headline, quickly joined by others blaring iterations of the same shocking news. The stark, unblinking picture of Lisa Hall, smiling broadly while clad in her service uniform, became a symbol cropped and spliced across myriad platforms, a portrait of unwavering dedication juxtaposed against headlines of tragedy and triumph. In the newsroom at WNN, a major national network, senior producer Karen Mitchell paced like a general surveying a battlefield. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, skipped across the room, getting tangled in the frenzy of urgent voices and beating hearts. "Get me someone on the ground in Arlington," she snapped, her voice carrying the unmistakable cadence of authority. "We need eyewitness accounts, first-hand narratives, and tighten up those leads. I want to lead with Hall's military service, then dive straight into the public response." The room buzzed with activity, Karen's orders sparking fresh waves of motion among reporters, who were quick to pivot from planned features to breaking news coverage. She navigated between the sea of desks, overseeing the synthesis of information from disparate sources into a cohesive narrative, a coherent documentation that demanded inquiry and accountability. As live feed cameras zoomed in on the courthouse steps, Karen's eyes flared with grim acknowledgement. The protests, the chants, the cohesive union of grief and resolve was painting a picture that defied simple reckoning. The footage was raw, unguarded, a digital map of resilience and righteous fury. Back in Arlington, Jennifer Hughes, an on-the-ground reporter, gripped her mic tightly, her breath visible in the cool night air. She navigated through the crowd's residual energy, capturing the spectrum of voices that defined the collective roar for change. Sergeant Hall was more than an officer. She was a beacon of integrity in our community, a local veteran said, his voice vibrating with the intensity of memory and loss. We need justice not just for her, but for every single person who has fallen victim to this bias, a young activist declared, eyes as bright as the lights capturing her truth for audiences nearby and far-flung. Jennifer caught every word, weaving them into a seamless narrative prepared to air on the evening broadcast. Her lens captured not just Lisa's family, but the vast network of supporters whose voices, if joined, could sway even the most formidable of walls, change-resistant and entrenched in years of bias and systemic oversight. But this was more than just a story. It was a microcosm of the national pulse echoing through communities grappling with the same pervasive shadows of prejudice, the same violent collisions of fear and authority. Each interview, each heartfelt plea, etched into the annals of broadcast history, added depth to the unfolding chapters, transforming the spotlight into a beacon signaling systemic change. As live footage cut back to the newsroom, the nation leaned in, the anticipation palpable, as millions tuned in to witness the latest updates on the situation that had marbled across headlines and social media threads. All stations, stand by! Karen's voice resonated crisply over the intercom, signaling the countdown to air. This is live, people. Let's show them the truth. The screens faded to black for a heartbeat, before springing back to life with a montage. The marchers, bold and resolute. Lisa's photograph, radiant and commanding. Her family's solemn protest, a paradigm of grief woven with grace. As she watched the seamless execution of the broadcast, each frame a call to action, each word a demand for justice, Karen knew this story was poised to do more than just inform. It was poised to inspire, to catalyze, to demand from the nation a reckoning long overdue. The segment concluded and the screen was flooded with social media updates, hearts and hashtags multiplying exponentially as viewers shared the coverage, igniting a digital movement that mirrored the physical march outside. The narrative was clear, the path illuminated by protest and promise, and somewhere in the clicks and hums of countless engagements lay the potential for real, tangible change. Viewers marveled at the unity, raw and powerful, stretching beyond what small screens could contain. A force that even tomorrow's headlines could not predict nor fully grasp. And as viewers turned to one another, whether in living rooms, cafes, or office break rooms, they murmured the sentiments bridging divides. Could this finally be the beginning of the end of these theatrics of discrimination? Where were you when Lisa Hall's story reshaped a nation? In the modest living room of the Hall family home, the emotional aftermath of the day's chaotic events simmered in the air, taut and unyielding. Lisa's family, encircled by supportive friends and community members, felt the imbalance of a world derailed and rudderless without the gravitational presence of their beloved daughter and sister. The walls, adorned with photographs of Lisa in various stages of her life, from a grinning toddler to a decorated Army sergeant, seemed to haunt the room with echoes of her laughter, the warmth of her presence, now substituted with a tangible void. Sarah Hall, Lisa's younger sister, sat by the window, clutching a framed photograph of Lisa in uniform. her eyes a stormy mix of admiration and torment. For all her composure at the rally, her public defiance masked a personal struggle rippling beneath the surface. A stark dichotomy of pride and devastation marked her every word, her every glance. In the center of the room, Linda Hall, Lisa's mother, commanded the space with a matriarchal strength that belied the grief etched deeply into the lines of her face. Her face was a landscape of quiet determination, a bastion of resilience bolstered by the unwavering faith in her daughter's intestinal fortitude and moral compass. Reporters had circled the house like vultures earlier on, lenses trained on the Hall family's every expression, probing for cracks in their armor through which headlines might emerge. Linda had stood defiantly on the front steps, addressing them with an eloquent ferocity that quieted even the most tireless newshounds. "We will not let this break us," she had declared, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unshed tears. Lisa was more than a headline. She was a person, a soldier, a sister, a daughter, and she will be remembered not just for her uniform, but for her humanity. Behind her, John Hall, Lisa's father, had stood as a stoic protector, his presence a quiet curtain of solitary resistance, covering his family with love and support. His military background lent a silent authority to his demeanor. The stars and stripes emblazoned on the flag draped artfully over the railing, standing as a testament to the moral ground the Halls held firm. The sound of the television, softly broadcasting coverage in the background, punctuated the air with fragmented glimpses of the unfolding national discourse. Lisa's name was spoken with reverence, the grainy footage from earlier intertwining with expertly crafted journalism, ensuring her story remained in the public forum. Back in the room, Linda sat, feeling the exhaustion weigh heavily on her shoulders, yet drawing infinite strength from the assembled group. "This won't be over tomorrow or the next day," she murmured, turning to the resolute circle of friends gathered. "We must stay vigilant, must keep telling her story, must make sure everyone sees the truth." Sarah looked across the room, her grief momentarily overshadowed by determination. "What about those calls from earlier? The military folks, did anyone get back?" "Yes," Linda confirmed, the memory of the earlier conversation lending her solace. "The Army's requested a meeting. They said they want to ensure Lisa's story isn't twisted into something unrecognizable." Heads nodded in agreement, a communal understanding that in this fight, allies from unexpected quarters emerged, seeking to lend credence to their struggle. "We have to keep them honest," John added, the words resonant and affirming. "This story can change more than just our community. It can ripple far beyond Arlington." As he spoke, the sense of unity among them grew palpable, binding their shared sorrow and hope into a force equally capable of transformation and transcending limitation. The room vibrated with a shared energy, each heart shored up by the collective strength surrounding the Hall family. The doorbell's sudden ring momentarily disrupted the flow, a reminder of the outside world still keenly focused on the Hall family's every action. Linda rose, signaling for quiet as she answered the door. The corridor beyond framed the visage of a reporter she recognized, a thoughtful face with pen poised, respectful yet persistent in her inquiry. "Mrs. Hall, if I may," she began, but Linda interrupted with a gentle shake of her head. The time for media had eclipsed, replaced by a more personal night filled with introspection and setting forth the strategy of a family caught between remembrance and reform. The reporter nodded understandingly, sensing the boundaries drawn. "Thank you for your strength. Please let us know how best we can support the true story," she offered, taking her leave with a firm hand to the heart, an unspoken pledge of sincerity. Back within the warmth of her home, Linda returned to her family, lighting a candle that flickered with the gentle promise of hope against the encroaching night. It was a small gesture, powerful and symbolically brimming with the belief that while Lisa's physical presence was absent, her spirit would guide them through these turbulent waters. Together, they sat in silence and solidarity, each committed to continuing Lisa's fight, each determined this wounded world would not swallow their hopes, and each resolute in their pledge to safeguard the narrative, a narrative insisting on justice integrity, and unwavering commitment to the truth amid a cacophony of challenges yet to unfold. Their silence spurred reflection among those watching from homes and screens around the country, a single question elevating above whispers. How many voices could join this call for change, for a new story to rise from the ashes of injustice? As dawn arrived, with pale strokes of light brushing across the city of Arlington, another kind of awakening stirred within the heart of the capital. The reverberations from Lisa Hall's shooting had propelled the issue of systemic racism and police reform into the forefront of political debate. The capital had become a hive of activity, its corridors echoing with conversations poised delicately between bureaucratic handling and genuine calls for sweeping change. Inside the cavernous meeting room of the mayor's office, local officials found themselves ensnared in an impromptu summit, a convergence that displayed not only the urgency of the moment, but the glaring inadequacies exposed by recent events. Mayor Anthony Ramirez sat thoughtfully at the head of an elongated conference table, the very image of leadership grappling with an extraordinary crisis. The air was thick with tension as people crowded into the room. Strategists and lawmakers, representatives and activists, all honed in on the singular goal of restorative justice. "We need to act, and we need to act decisively," Mayor Ramirez began, breaking the silence that lay heavy across the room. His voice carried the resonant depth of an orator, prepared to navigate the turbulent waters of political maneuvering while remaining cognizant of the community's demands. "We have a duty beyond protocols. This is about rebuilding the trust shattered between law enforcement and those they swore to protect. Let's be clear. What happened to Sergeant Hall is an indictment of systemic failure, one we must confront head-on." His statements were met with a hum of agreement punctuated by a few dissenting voices. Traditionalists worried about the risk of swift action infringing on established processes. Yet their concerns were drowned under the swell of progressive urgency that ruled the day. Councilwoman Abigail Chen, a fierce advocate for equality and reform, leaned forward, eyes glinting with determination. "We can't afford to drag our feet, not while the nation watches, waiting to see if we'll follow rhetoric with action," she insisted, her voice cutting through doubts with a clarity that demanded attention. "We need policy changes, immediate amendments to police conduct protocols, and I propose initiating those from the ground up with bias training reinforcements and the establishment of a civilian oversight committee," she continued, each proposal outlined with deliberate precision. The room erupted into fervent discussions about potential solutions, each representative and council lobbying for actionable paths forward. Ideas grazed across topics elemental to root reform: integration of military sensitivity training within law enforcement, amplified community engagement, bipartisan support to draft state bills enhancing accountability. Drawing from the well of military ethics and order, Captain Harmon, the distinguished military legal advisor invited to bridge the gap between civilian and military perspectives, spoke with a measured calm. "Lisa Hall's service is emblematic of national sacrifice made personal, an alignment we civilian faction encounter with less tactile confrontations," he said, fostering an open flow of communication strategies. His words directed attention toward complementary strategies forged within military ranks, crafting an argument that spoke to inclusivity from an informative liaison perspective. As discussions deepened, a shared vision of justice rooted in a commitment to eradicating systemic prejudices began constellating within the room, a playbook sketched with integrity, ambition, and carefully annotated room for reformation. While media spins narratives, some that help, some that hinder, we must focus on facilitating real transparency. Ramirez's voice regained the floor, steering the committee's brainstorming toward resolving these issues through legislative collaboration rather than abrasive power struggles. Their session concluded hours later, culminating in a refreshed agreement underscored by urgency of unity, to usher in a task force with autonomy expansive enough to demand righteous progression within police structure and legislative maneuvering of policy change unparalleled. Outside the walls of officialdom, political tension mirrored a microcosm of communities nationwide grappling with the visceral demand for change sparked by Lisa's plight. That morning's news bombarded the airwaves with policy announcements, cementing a collective commitment to address deeply ingrained inequalities and transform hollow apologies into something tangible. As Arlington's streets awakened once more to the metaphorical pulse of reform and promises became the initial steps toward transforming reality, news outlets disseminated live updates to homes and businesses. Their nuanced dialogues captured the cross-section of determination between political paradigms and communal activism, reflecting a seismic shift traversing seamlessly between advocacy and actionable regulation. For Lisa Hall's family, the waves rippling from the epicenter of their own loss overflowed onto influence anew, a profound demonstration of justice being contracted into tangible promises, underpinning hope with frameworks of governmental checks and balances. Thus, as night descended once more, a sleep-laden quiet enveloped a city teetering on the fledgling wings of tomorrow's promise. Gilded hues of possibility married to the commitment of human and legislative unity. The shadows, flickering over cornerstone institutions, lent an enduring elegance to whispers of long-awaited change. Etched indelibly into the nascent calls of civic duty rallied across hearts, spanning not just local precincts, but the breadth of a nation awakening whole. Inspired by the resilience of a mother's heart, an officer's dignity, a sister's compassion, poured into public forum, and the indomitable courage of hearts ready to rebuild. With each meeting, march, and municipality rising into reaction, hope extended beyond horizons, and the narrative transformed into something nobody dared to dismiss, a society poised on the brink of reimagining what true justice looked like. The room was dimly lit, a solitary lamp casting a pool of muted light across the table where Officer Mark Reynolds sat, hands clasped tightly in front of him. His uniform, so often a source of pride, now served as a binding chain, its insignias heavier than the sum of his career to date. Facing him across the table, his union representative, a seasoned negotiator named Jeff Barker, sat with a grim facade flanked by two attorneys whose steady gazes revealed no flickers of personal sentiment. The departmental review had been expedited, thrust into motion by a cascade of public outrage and political pressure that demanded immediate accountability. Reynolds's mind was a tumult of images. Lisa Hall's bewildered face, grasping at understanding, the crowd's cacophony, the metallic taste of adrenaline in his mouth. Despite the evidence stacked against him, a small corner of his consciousness clung desperately to an understanding of his actions. Yet within the confines of this room, under the scrutiny of trained observers, doubt was a spreading cancer, metastasizing through every fiber of his being. Jeff leaned forward, his voice low and measured. "Mark, you've got to be honest here. This is a serious situation. The review board and the public need your truth, the complete truth." Reynolds nodded, his throat dry and voice brittle as he began. "It wasn't like I didn't want to shoot her. It's just she moved and I felt..." His voice trailed off, leaving his words hanging in the sterile air. The attorneys exchanged a glance, scribbling notes in their open legal pads. Barker pressed gently but firmly, sensing the officer teetering at the precipice of revelation. "Mark, walk us through it exactly. The thoughts, the decisions, every second." He took a deep breath, compelled to recount the incident despite the chaotic tapestry his recollection was woven from. "I saw her reach for something. I was afraid. In training, we're taught that hesitation could be the difference between life and..." "Did you see a weapon?" one of the attorneys interrupted, cutting through Reynolds's justifications with a razor-edged precision. "Did she threaten you? Was there anything at all that justified you pulling the trigger?" The air was tense. the silence between questions more accusatory than any shouted condemnation. Reynolds shifted in his seat, staring down at his hands. His voice weighed heavy with a dawning self-awareness that clouded his justification. "No," he admitted, almost inaudibly. "I never saw a weapon. I just reacted." A collective exhale seemed to fill the room. Both the relief of truth's admission and the chilling gravity of its implications. Barker's face was a mask of complex, intertwining emotions, a man caught between loyalty, duty, and the demands of justice. "This acknowledgement is crucial, Mark," Barker stated gravely. "It's going to shape everything moving forward. The department needs transparency, and the community needs accountability." Reynolds nodded, his heart pounding against the cage of his ribs. The room's shadows seemed to encroach upon him, resonating with the voices outside that thrummed with the demand for justice and change. Meanwhile, outside this confined confessional, the precinct was abuzz with a frenzied anticipation born of recent revelations. Cops conversed in hushed tones, replaying segments of footage from Lisa's service, her impeccable record now inseparable from the tragedy surrounding her name. As shifts changed and officers clocked in and out, there lingered a palpable tension that mirrored the uncertainties swelling within their ranks. Questions about conduct, ethics, and the enduring bias woven into the very fabric of enforcement doctrine. At dawn, the city had become both crucible and courtroom, its inhabitants watching rapt as institutions once parceled by compartmentalized secrecy now faced a reckoning, compelled to evolve or risk systemic disintegration. Back in the room, Jeff placed a hand on Reynolds' shoulder. Not so much for comfort, but for stability, a reminder of the balance they strive to maintain amid the chaos swirling beyond those walls. "You did the right thing admitting it," he said softly, his mind already calculating the trajectory this might pave through public discourse. "Full accountability is coming, Mark. Prepare yourself." Reynolds could only nod, encapsulated in a twilight zone of remorse, his future draped with uncertainties, still etched into the outlines of fallen shadows traversing his consciousness. As they moved toward the door, the hallway beyond mirrored the external world, bustling yet suspended, fraught with unresolved tensions, poised at the cusp of shifting paradigms. Officer Reynolds faced emerging ramifications with each step, a journey tethered to moments of perception and prejudice, destined to echo across the wider landscape of public conscience. The corridors resonated with footsteps, dutiful echoes underscoring the changes demanded by a society thirsting for evolution, justice, and the unspooling narrative of accountability. And beyond those cloistered walls, perhaps through the process of truth-seeking and reform, a unified community could reimagine a world wherein service uniforms serve only as definitions of honor, justice, and unwavering equality. The Pentagon was a monument of brisk, disciplined activity, even before the first light of day. Within its vast, labyrinthine halls, the issue of Sergeant Lisa Hall's shooting dominated whispered discussions and strategic meetings alike. This was not merely a matter of individual tragedy. It reverberated as a significant breach of trust and respect for the military institution itself. General Michael Thompson, a respected figure known for his unyielding dedication to both his troops and national equity, sat at the head of a long, polished table. Around him were the major stakeholders of the U.S. Army, a coalition of generals, legal advisors, and public communications strategists. Their decades of service culminated in a palpable authority over the room, setting the tone for the gravity of the proceedings. "This incident is beyond unacceptable," General Thompson stated, his voice a resonant force that captured every ear and eye in the room. "It not only jeopardizes our relations with civilian communities, but strikes at the heart of what it means to serve as an emblem of justice and protection." The room agreed silently, a united front acknowledging the broader implications of Hall's shooting and its potential to fracture the fragile alliance between military and civilian populations already strained by societal inequities. Colonel Martha Eagles, a fierce advocate for institutional transparency, leaned forward, the gleam of determination in her eyes underscoring her storied reputation for cutting through bureaucratic red tape. We must be proactive, not reactive. Our response will set a precedent, not just here but globally, on how the military addresses racial biases and systemic failures, both within and without. Her words hung in the air, a challenge as much as a guidepost, urging the assembly towards decisive action rather than placative posturing. Beside her, Major Sean Bradley, a career military officer whose service record spanned multiple deployments, added, "We need to stand with Sergeant Hall's family, not just through words, but by taking meaningful actions that convey our continued commitment to justice. This needs to include participating directly with the investigatory process, ensuring transparency and accountability at every level." The dialogue expanded, mapping an actionable framework to engage both with the public demand for justice and the internal reforms needed to address biases within their ranks. Discussion turned quickly to troop engagements with civilian law enforcement agencies, considering how training and coordination might cultivate a mutual respect and understanding, reducing the likelihood of such catastrophic encounter. As suggestions and evaluations intersected, General Thompson remained pensive, absorbing the strategic insights pooled from their collective expertise. The gravity of his deliberation stitched closely to the broader sentiment sweeping through the military establishment, one that did not ignore the anger felt in every bar, base, and civilian settlement reacting to Lisa's story. Decision time reached. The general cleared his throat, drawing focus. "We issue a formal statement. Affirm our unyielded obligation to service integrity and community alliance, a public recognition of failure without shying away from justice. Our ranks demand. Reconfirm our commitment to working alongside civilian authorities and advocates, establishing new norms and practices for joint understanding and safety." The room pulsated with assent, an orchestra of authority ready to broadcast their unified voice across a nation holding its breath, waiting for leadership from those venerated as the nation's warriors. We need a narrative beyond blame, about ensuring no more lives are unjustly silenced or service legacies marred by short-sighted ordinance, General Thompson concluded, his conviction deep as mountain roots. "We owe it to Sergeant Hall, her family, and every service member past and present." With that, the assembly broke to distribute their declaration, its drafting swift but thorough, a testimony to military efficiency wielded toward civil healing. As typed drafts and verbal affirmations rippled outward through digital mediums and official channels, the echoing sentiment carried a weight far beyond the confines of generals and commanders. It became part of the national lexicon, a beacon of unity aimed at illuminating pathways where once only wire-fenced biases had stood sentinel. The Pentagon's statement reverberated through communities, instilling a tempered hope that, founded in messages of reform and solidarity, suggested reconciliation and reformation were not only possible but necessary. As the afternoon sun warmed the cityscape and the hand of discipline shaped a new military narrative, the story of Sergeant Lisa Hall's sacrifice carried on the wind, a wind capable of transforming the resulting storm of systemic discontent into a tempest, seeking change, equality, and justice. These discussions stretched across distances, bridging gaps between hearts and institutions, embedding Lisa's legacy within the very script of America's continuing march toward equality, prompted by honor, compelled by justice, and achieving transformations propelled not by singular acts, but united resolve. Across the vast tapestry of America, the story of Lisa Hall became a groundswell that reverberated through communities, campuses, and households. Conversations sparked and often collided, revealing tectonic shifts in discourse around race and policing, exploding into broader debates about the very essence of justice in a nation teetering on the edge of change. In Washington, D.C., Georgetown University's main quad, typically a quiet bastion of academic pursuit, buzzed with impromptu forums spontaneously formed by students converging on the campus green under the sprawling canopy of ancient elms, Students, faculty, and passers-by engaged in dialogue both earnest and raw. A sophomore, with keen eyes and a forceful grip on her notebook, stood atop a low stone wall, addressing her peers with youthful fervor. This is more than just another case to forget when the news cycle moves on. Lisa Hall's story is a catalyst for real change, a symbol of what happens when prejudice blinds justice. Around her, the crowd swayed, respectful but restive, bursting with opinions and insights. They embodied a generation eager to step beyond romanticized activism into the grit of concrete action. A modern-day agora where ideals met real-world complexity. Nearby, a group of law students huddled over laptops, their screens casting a phosphorescent glow across determined faces. Depths of legal articles, constitutional debates, and systemic reform proposals piled high, forming a fortress of research and rebuttals as they formulated petitions and crafted policy recommendations. Legality's only a piece of the puzzle, argued Jake, a third-year student whose focus blended law with societal justice. He flipped through a digital case study on racial incidents paralleling Hall's. Without changing the hearts and legislative frameworks that prop up these injustices, we won't see meaningful progress. In the overflow of his words, Amber, a fellow classmate and pre-law activist, forcefully interjected, "Hearts change slower than laws, Jake. We need both wheels moving together. Public sentiment and legal structures evolving simultaneously." Their discussions reflected a mirrored image of similar debates erupting within coffee shops, virtual forums, and living rooms nationwide. Communities were awakening to an essential dialectic: how to systematically reconcile the values of personal freedom against ingrained bias stigmas stretched across centuries. Vivid portrayals of this discourse colored dated murals alongside hashtags swollen with resonance. Sarah Hall had taken to digital canvases to supplement her sister's legacy posthumous activism, her words both eloquent and piercing, stitched together online communities, converging their voices into digital protests of unprecedented scale. Simultaneously, talk shows and news broadcasts grappled with the polemic depths underscoring Lisa's narrative, bringing human faces to abstract policies and arithmetical crime statistics. Panels conducted by thought leaders broke down barriers, sigils of change emerging from shared stories that crossed ethnic, financial, and ideological boundaries. An acclaimed civil rights leader, Reverend Malcolm Jenkins, appeared on one such program, his commanding presence magnified as he drew from history to underline his message. "We are at a pivotal juncture, a moment history will scrutinize. The vigor of revolutions past must inspire us now," connecting threads from Frederick Douglass to Lisa Hall. Across the nation, protests swelled, activist groups aligning their energies, crafting fresh chants that echoed through the streets, transcending borders and echoes of past movements. The fight against racial injustice gained renewed momentum, with Lisa's face and story often at its center, a poignant reminder that systemic changes weren't just desired but demanded by the moral soul of a nation. Even as pundits parsed, augmenting public emotion with intellectual rigor, street art flourished under viaducts and across skyscrapers. Vivid murals of Lisa in decisive posture, uniform gleaming as a bastion of radiance against muted cityscapes, reminding all viewers of the valor and value her life encapsulated. In coffee shops, churches, and legion halls, every meeting was motion, driving force crafted from sanded edges of resistance into the smooth curves of alliance and mutuality. This awakening, fiercely alive and bracingly honest, injected a renewed commitment into veins weary with the fight for equality, pulsing toward a collective resolution firmly committed to upholding the dignity and justice Lisa Hall had exemplified in life and sacrifice. Thus, as daylight waned and the streets settled into the night's embrace, the enduring hum of dialogue grew louder within the quiet moments, reflecting an undeniable truth. America stood at the cusp of unveiling new chapters in its storied narrative of justice inspired by a soldier's silent testimony that now reverberated across every corner, every community, every conscience of a nation resolute on redressing ages-old wrong. In a dimly lit room within the heart of Arlington, whispers of unity and determination coursed through the close-knit group of Lisa Hall's fellow soldiers. They had gathered quietly, away from the media's glare and the cacophony of public discourse, to forge a path forward that would honor their fallen comrade. Sergeant David Harris, a close friend and confidant of Lisa's, had taken it upon himself to lead this clandestine gathering. His military bearing was counterbalanced by a raw vulnerability, his eyes betraying the personal toll Lisa's loss had exacted on him and their unit collectively. A small circle of men and women sat around a scarred wooden table, the air infused with a resolute energy. They were a mosaic of ethnicities, ranks, and backgrounds, united by shared service and the indelible impact Lisa had left on their lives. "We're here because Lisa meant something vital to each of us," Harris began, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions roiling beneath the surface. "She was a soldier through and through, but more than that, she was our friend, our sister. We need to make sure her voice isn't silenced by bureaucracy or forgotten in the tide of outrage." The room remained hushed, each participant holding their breath, waiting for the direction this meeting would take. Private Jenna Mills, a fresh face in the unit, spoke up, her words resonating with youthful fervor and clarity. "We should organize something public, but not just another protest. A memorial that reflects who she was, that captures her spirit and drives forward what she stood for." "We need more than ceremony," countered Corporal Ray Gilmore, an articulate advocate for continued activism. "This should be a rallying point for grounding change, applying military protocols to community projects, bridging gaps that led to this tragedy." Each proposal lit a spark of ideas, their expressions testifying to the depth of their commitment as the conversation flowed between honoring Lisa and translating collective grief into a springboard for tangible reform. Technical Sergeant Olivia Nguyen tapped a pencil against her notepad, eyes sharp as she spoke. "What about partnering with civilian groups on this? Use our network and discipline to create initiatives that strengthen community bonds and police relations." Lisa always believed in building bridges. The room resonated with quiet agreement. Nods exchanged among them as her peers absorbed the power of collaborative advocacy. It would require strategic coordination, blending resources like military precision and civilian advocacy into an architectural framework of progress. "Everyone here has skills, connections. Let's mobilize them," Harris said, his gaze shifting from Nguyen to the rest of his team. "We'll start by contacting local leaders and organizations Lisa was tied to, pulling together resources for a memorial service that cements our commitment not just to remembrance but to ongoing action." Outside, the moon slipped through cloud cover like a sentinel overseeing their shared pledge, a luminous reminder of the legacy taking shape beneath its gaze. Here, inside, warmed by pledges and vows, Lisa's unit became a crucible forging purpose from tragedy, determined to ensure the shooting wasn't merely a reflection of failure, but a rallying cry for change. One by one, they made commitments to reach out to community leaders, to organize events, to speak with legal advocates willing to join forces for justice. "We've got to push for an official Army statement supporting systemic reforms as well," Gilmore added, eyes defiant in the glow of low light. "We're soldiers, but we're members of the community too. This affects all facets of our lives." As their tactical discussion unfurled, the air charged with the collective will of soldiers transcribing their grief into action. This room, this meeting, became an epicenter of change, beyond the brick-and-mortar confining walls to an expanse of potential stretching into societal good. Hours upon hours shifted away until, with a consensus reached, Sergeant Harris concluded the meeting with an introspective realization. "Best way to remember Hall is to live by the morality she taught us and stand beside the convictions she would have fought for." The silent prayer that followed bore witness to their pact, a subsidiary promise, hallowed by friendship, sealed by commitments as militaristic as it was personal. There, beneath a ceiling yet untouched by dawn's hues, shared burdens transformed into unified purpose. As they dispersed into the languid night, every soldier carried with them a resolve reverberating through the nation, a symbol encapsulated by grassroots devotion more resilient than even metallic weapons, in forging a future safeguarded by truths fundamental to equity and justice. Wild silence fell over the emptying room, a testament to the sacredness of agency invested by those who dared to love, protect, and advocate. Lights dimmed slowly, shadows receding from seats occupied by people whose strength lay equally in presence, persistence, and profound love for their own. Despite a world-weathering chaos, an anthem of insight poised to birth freedom, an echo, a unity consonant with a pledge of tempered action. And somewhere beneath star-lit canopies, humanity blearily blinked awake to embrace an unbroken march of progress anew. The newsroom of the Arlington Tribune was buzzing with the urgency and intensity that only breaking news could summon. Despite the usual hum of computers and the steady stream of reporters weaving through aisles, today felt different, more electric, charged by the wave of revelations emerging about the officer involved in the shooting of Lisa Hall. At the center of this maelstrom sat Maya Turner, one of the paper's most dogged investigative journalists. Her desk was a mountainous landscape of notes, clippings, and sources, all pointing toward an unfolding narrative that demanded attention and justice. Her latest lead was revealing something disturbing. The officer who shot Lisa, Mark Reynolds, was not a stranger to controversy. Past allegations and complaints, suppressed, downplayed, or settled quietly, were now coming to the surface. Previously sealed records unearthed under the scrutiny of increased media attention and public inquiry. Maya ran a hand through her hair, eyes flicking over a printout with grim determination. The file contained multiple civilian complaints filed against Reynolds, primarily by people of color, claiming racial profiling and excessive force. Yet, these accusations, though significant, had never gone beyond internal reviews, each finding mysteriously lost in the paper shuffle of bureaucratic gridlock. "Hey, Maya," called Jordan Lee, a fellow reporter, motioning to his monitor. "I've got a source willing to confirm those cases where Reynolds was involved didn't even hit the internal affairs radar. There's talk he had protectors upstairs." "Unbelievable," Maya muttered, taking the information in stride while inwardly steeling herself against the familiar bitterness of systemic betrayal. She understood the gravity. Each uncovered item was a piece of a larger mosaic, reflecting deeply ingrained prejudices, not just individual failings. As evidence mounted and the story developed shape, Maya's reporting grew into a whirlwind. She made calls, following paper trails expertly buried beneath layers of red tape. She tugged at threads, once left to fray before the national spotlight tilted their direction. Her research wove patterns so blatant they screamed for accountability, in echoes louder than the silence that had protected Reynolds. By midday, her desk was visited by their managing editor, Ann Carlisle, whose presence signaled both interest and urgency. Ann surveyed the scene, picking up a file and flipping through with a seasoned eye. "This looks promising, Maya," she said, her measured tone underpinned by a vein of encouragement. "But we need something more relatable, something that hits home with readers who aren't familiar with procedural drudgeries. Personalize it, make people care." Ann's words were a call to arms, and Maya knew what she needed to do. Compelling narratives weren't just born from facts, they required faces, voices, and visceral connections with the human experience. Her next interviews took her into local neighborhoods, speaking to those who had crossed paths with Reynolds. Stories emerged, as layered as they were unsettling. Community members recounted their experiences, many stained by fear, others by a resigned acceptance of discrimination's invisible hand. A soft-spoken grandmother recalled an incident where her grandson, a promising high school athlete and aspiring engineer, had been stopped and frisked because he was wearing the wrong colors in the wrong neighborhood, all under Officer Reynolds's watchful eye. Her tears punctuated a painful, pervasive narrative known too well among marginalized communities. Maya's investigation, however, wasn't confined solely to Reynolds. Parallel paths took her to those who'd worked alongside him, peers whose silence had protected complicit guilt. Unlike Reynolds, some were willing to speak, finally free from the unbinding of fraternity code. Mark wasn't overtly racist, but there was always tension around him, an unspoken line you knew he'd cross if given a chance, admitted a colleague, under the cover of anonymity. We reported issues, but somehow he always wriggled free. Perhaps it's because he knew how to skirt, exactly how much you can push without a formal bite. The revelations were both disheartening and galvanizing, instigating fervent plans within the newsroom for a series of articles slated to provoke awareness, public debate, and inspire oversight reforms. By the late afternoon, as shades of twilight brushed the sky with a gentle touch, Maya returned to her editor's office. Her findings, now a meticulously documented account of professional misconduct and unrestrained authority, formed a living tapestry of narratives, demanding each injustice be scrutinized, and scanned the documents again before meeting Maya's eyes with steady resolve. "This will do it," she said, breathing life into the investigative triumph Maya knew this story deserved. "Let's get this to print and let the reverberations begin." The article's release would be digital first, spreading rapidly across social platforms, capturing attention like wildfire. It would also be accompanied by a dedicated space in the morning edition, a physical testament to truth in ink and paper that no digital deletion could erase. As that evening wore on, Maya walked through the echoing halls of the quieting newsroom, her heart alight with the impending impact. Her determination was a beacon, an affirmation that journalism still held the power to call systems to task, to proclaim that silence and shadows could ultimately be dissipated by the light of truth. This story, the story of systemic failures now visible to all, was poised to ignite a deeper movement within and beyond Arlington, revealing to the world the necessity of dismantling forces in life denying equal justice. It was not just about Reynolds or the affected, but about national conversations emboldened anew by every dropped leaf of truth turned. Inside the labyrinthine corridors of the Pentagon, a guarded meeting unfurled, a convergence of military leaders gathering to dissect an internal report that had landed on their desks like a hard-hitting bombshell. The document detailed systemic issues within their ranks, underscoring the insidious vulnerabilities exposed by Sergeant Lisa Hall's tragic shooting. Colonel Martha Eagles took her seat, eyes focused yet brimming with complexity, reflecting her commitment to transparency and reform. Across from her sat General Michael Thompson, flanked by other key figures whose solemn faces mirrored the weight of the revelations spread across the table. The room hummed with a tense anticipation, each pocket of space occupied by voices schooled in duty and decorum, now faced with layers of systemic rot they couldn't simply command away. The report was blunt in its assessment, pulling no punches. It confirmed the troubling overlap of military procedure with civilian policing protocols, a convergence that, while intended for efficiency and cohesion, had instead fractured under the pressure of ingrained biases and blurred jurisdictions. "There are patterns here, repetitive threads," began Major Sean Bradley, his words woven from personal conviction and the weight of duty. "It's clear we're seeing not just isolated incompatibility, but a breakdown and dissemination of ethics within joint trainings." Colonel Eagles nodded, flipping through pages highlighting recurring failures in accountability measures. "This isn't just about reprimanding individuals," she said. "We're looking at root problems too deep-seated to ignore. We have to address the intersections between our military culture and those of civilian policing agencies. The question is, how do we uproot such entrenched biases?" A pause wove itself through the room, the enormity of their task casting long shadows across furrowed brows. They stared into the nexus of challenges, contemplating the threads of in-house prejudice, unreported incidents, and institutional resistance tethered to deeply coded framework. Colonel Steve Garland, known for his strategic foresight and out-of-the-box thinking, interjected with the pragmatic skepticism that often preceded action. A top-down reformation is going to be met with hurdles, a combination of inertia and denial. We need buy-in from every level, from base command to individual soldiers, educators to citizens. We've got to foster a culture shift. It starts with transparency, Eagles asserted, her voice unwavering as she met each of their gazes. If the military is going to participate in civilian law enforcement partnerships, then our policies must be transparent and inclusive, under scrutiny as hard as our steel. As their discussion deepened, the gravity of possibilities and pathways unfolded into a purposeful crescendo. They dissected layers out of necessity and duty, mapping clear initiatives aimed at increasing transparency in joint ventures. By diligently probing and reforming these flawed alliances, nationally coordinated trainings would be revisited and revised, focusing on eliminating prejudicial paradigms that lent police powers an unchecked edge. This wouldn't be mere retooling. It was a fundamental overhaul with education and interaction at its core, reverberating far beyond immediate policy. General Thompson broached the concept of utilizing force multipliers, community and advocacy partnerships that could bring in perspectives traditionally sidelined in military strategization. Eagles added, "We also need comprehensive reviews on our methodologies for personnel exchange, forging clearer guidelines that synergize, instead of conflict, with civilian counterparts." Their conclusions glimmered upon formidable challenges, their actions destined to sculpt the changing landscape of military-civil relations. The occupants of that room committed themselves to transformative efforts anchored in reinforcing justice, promoting trust, and fortifying equality across every interaction their uniform entailed. As the meeting wound to a close, they knew the hard work was only beginning. Implementation required more than theoretical resolve. It demanded staunch fortitude to foster earmarked changes through collaborative advocacy and tactical execution. Across the country, word of the internal report, once shrouded in confidentiality, began leaking out, signaling the military's burgeoning commitment toward healing and reclamation. A veil lifted, exposing a promise to rebalance the scales, tipped arbitrarily against lives unchanged by barter or bureaucratic policy. The reforms charted by their resolutions required sustained courage, yet it was courage tempered not by sanctioned orders, but by the necessity forged in answers long deferred against urgent societal callings. With mutual affirmations they began filing out. These leaders made architects of an impending movement. Their resolve, stirred by echoes of hopeful progress, reached beyond rank and regulation into a new mosaic of accountable action, a narrative of military engagement that threaded collectively toward redemptive evolution. Sergeant Lisa Hall's name, no longer confined to tragedy, would henceforth be inscribed upon a collective effort of reconciliation, defining a transformative moment destined to shape the heart of American unity. Drafted into the legacy of every soldier following her steadfast call, the courthouse steps had become a stage set for truth. The day was luminescent, bathed in an autumnal glow that heightened the contrast between the solemnity of the stone facade and the vibrancy of the crowd gathered before it. Overhead, cameras clustered like metallic birds poised to capture the unfolding narrative, a testament to public scrutiny, preparedness, and simmering expectancies. The anticipation hummed as people filled every open space, drawn together by the shared momentum of a community standing on the cusp of justice. Witnesses prepared to step forward, to speak not just to the events of a tragic morning, but to the pervasive issues that had long lingered in shadows, unaddressed. A hush fell over the crowd as the first witness, Clara James, made her way to the podium set amidst a sea of banners and signs. Clara, a nearby resident and bystander on the fateful morning, had witnessed the unfolding chaos through the lens of her own life, colored by too many similar stories left untold. She stood there, small yet resolute, her presence anchored by the weight of her testimony. With a steadying breath, she began to recount the day from her own perspective, her words carrying the rhythm of familiarity and heartfelt activism. "I saw Lisa that day," Clara said, her voice amplified against the silence. "I saw her calm, composed, a soldier doing what she always did, serving. And I also saw the fear in her eyes when confronted by the officer." Her voice wavered for a moment, catching the shared grief resting heavily in the air. "I saw the moment that changed everything, not just for her, but for all of us." Her testimony was punctuated by palpable silence, each pause filled by the murmured agreement of those who knew, deeply, what her words meant. Clara lifted her gaze, sweeping over the crowd composed of neighbors, activists, and individuals seeking solidarity through change. "There are too many stories like Lisa's," she continued, a bedrock of determination beneath every syllable. "Too many mornings when hope is underscored by tragedy. This can't be our legacy, to repeat these narratives. We need change, and we need it now." As she stepped down, others rose to speak, witness after witness, recounting their own scraps of that day's events, each narrative stitching together a broader picture of injustice. Their words transcended individual accounts to collectively amplify a suppressed cry for reform, drawing nods and heart-score recognition from the onlookers. Community leaders, friends, and fellow soldiers each stood forth, taking their place along with relatives who shared personal anecdotes, each personifying the connective tissue binding them to Lisa's story, each voice carrying an echo of dignity, sorrow, and resolve. Among these was Reverend Malcolm Jenkins, whose voice boomed with the clarity and charisma of one who understood the power of spoken truth. "This isn't just about one morning, nor should it be confined to that day alone. Lisa Hall's strength, resilience, and integrity reflect everything this nation aspires to achieve, yet falls short due to systemic fault lines." His words soared across the gathered souls, hands lifting in agreement, an unspoken promise uniting everyone into a force that matched Lisa's unwavering spirit. The testimonies continued as hours waned into the afternoon, each story building upon the last, creating a mosaic depicting both the failed structures they lived within and the pathway to grace they sought. The communal heartbeat grew stronger, bolstered by solidarity, cultivated through compassion and shared resolve. The final speaker was a surprise, a young girl named Asha, barely in her teens. She spoke with innocence and a poignant depth as she shared how Lisa inspired her to dream beyond the boundaries imposed by others. "When I grow up," Asha declared, "I want to be just like Lisa Hall, brave, strong, and kind. They say she fought for us even at the end. So we have to do the same, fight for her and for all of us." Her simple aspiration resonated like a bell tolling across generations, inviting future architects of change toward a common purpose. As Asha finished, the crowd erupted in applause, echoing across the courthouse and merging with hearts catalyzed by truth. Each word spoken that day carried the potential for revolution, a public testimony calling for healing through the dismantling of injustice's entrenched specters. Somewhere within the coverage, cameras caught it all: the faces, the tears, the smiles, the stirring unity that would play across screens nationwide, inviting others to join a growing movement nurtured through creativity, awareness, and the unyielding spirit of those who refuse to be silenced. In the fading light, the courthouse steps remained vibrant with energy, a fulcrum of collective identity, birthing transformative ideals. Lisa Hall's name, spoken across continents, became synonymous with a new era where racial injustices were challenged actively, rawed against strongholds of introspective reflection and proactive courage. As the crowd dispersed, carried on the promise of shared humanity and hope, there lingered an understanding astride the shimmering echo of radiant voices. This community, and many more, would find the strength to insist that justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. Seeking the light of justice, across the unfurling seas of possibility. In the quietude of her childhood room, Sarah Hall sat surrounded by reminders of her sister. The walls were lined with posters and awards, each a tapestry of Lisa's journey from a spirited youth to a staunch, disciplined protector in uniform. The room held the echoes of Lisa's laughter, the scent of her favorite lavender perfume still detectable in the air, a spectral reminder of her presence now captured more poignantly in memory. Sarah clutched one of Lisa's diaries, its edges worn soft by time and touch. Lisa had always been diligent about chronicling her life, capturing triumphs, struggles, and aspirations with the same precision she applied to her service. Today, those intimate pages provided Sarah with a window into understanding the essence of her sister's resolve. Flipping through the pages, Sarah stumbled upon entries that transported her back to moments shared, some filled with laughter, some clouded by the shadow of obstacles they faced as young black women navigating a world that often threatened to steal their dreams. "I joined the army because I wanted to make a difference," Lisa had written in a scribbled, determined hand. "Not just for me, but for anyone who doubted what they were capable of being, simply because of where they came from or the color of their skin." These words struck a chord deep within Sarah, a minor swell of truth that illuminated what she had always known. Lisa was more than her hero. She was a change-maker, a force of nature determined to rewrite narratives confined by societal limitations. Sarah shifted on the bed, curling deeper into the embrace of memory as she read on. Each entry painted a picture more vivid than any photograph. Annotated with dreams of advancing racial and gender equality, her sister's voice captured in a loop of conviction that transcended the ink on each page. One particular entry detailed an incident during training, a stark reminder of the discrimination Lisa had often faced. A senior officer had questioned her capacity to lead, wrapping veiled doubts in patronizing guidance. Despite the rising frustration captured on the page, Lisa's words remained steadfast, refusing to be overshadowed by the prejudice she encountered. The first hearing lasted over an hour. "Every barrier will bend before the force of unified resistance," Lisa had declared in defiant script. "Never forget, we are magic." Armed with this narrative of resilience, Sarah understood that her sister's legacy wasn't simply one of heartbreak. It was woven tightly with the resolve to change minds and open hearts, laying foundations for those who would come after. Her fingers traced the indents on the pages, absorbing the warrior spirit now converted into a rallying cry for reform. Lisa's dreams became more than translucent echoes. They were blueprints for change, passed on to Sarah like a sacred inheritance. The day unfolded outside her window, gilded in shades of gold and amber, a visual coaxing to move forward, to transform what had been into what could be. Lisa's vision, embodied now through every word held in this precious diary, had grown beyond the constraints of a single life. It had ignited a movement. Armed with newfound clarity, Sarah gathered her resolve, taking her sister's diary with her as she moved throughout the house, where her family had been congregating, strategizing, mourning, and mobilizing ever since the incident. Lisa's vision had cast ripples across not just their family, but communities grappling with injustice, and it was Sarah's turn to fuel the continuation of her mission. She made her way to where her parents were seated, their faces bearing the stoic compassion of people who had weathered the worst and emerged rooted in love. "We need to share Lisa's story with the world," Sarah declared, holding the diary out like a vessel containing truth and hope. Not just what happened, but who she was, what she stood for, what she wanted to change. Her mother, Linda, nodded slowly, eyes glistening with both sorrow and pride. "We can't let them forget. We can bring her dreams into every spotlight, every conversation." John Hall gathered his daughter close, his voice tremulous but resolute. "We'll make sure of it. Her fight isn't over. It's only just begun." Together, they crafted a plan. One that involved community programs, partnerships with advocacy groups, educational scholarships for minority youth, and speaking engagements aimed at fostering dialogue and understanding. As dusk transformed the day into night, Leaving stars to cast their ancient light across the sky, the Hall family sat together, linked by legacy, courage, and an unwavering commitment to justice. The ideals Lisa had fought for in life harnessed a spirited surge in those she left behind, each action a heartbeat magnified in efforts woven to dismantle oppression and invigorate a narrative of equality and compassion across every crease of their shared nation. There, in the warm confines of a family united by shared purpose, the promise loomed like a quiet, lighthouse promise, a pledge infused with Lisa's indomitable courage, the narrative of transformation, begun with a single name, exclaiming, "Into the breach," with the audacity of hope, nurtured by the power of love. The night was alive with a quiet electricity, as candlelight vigils flickered to life across towns and cities. These gatherings were an affirming testament not only to Sergeant Lisa Hall's enduring legacy, but also to a nation galvanized by the powerful call for justice that her story had ignited. In Arlington, the main square was transformed into a serene sea of glowing orbs. Each candle represented a personal pledge, a protective flame against the chilling winds of racial injustice. People from diverse backgrounds, different races, religions, ages, and identities stood side by side, silent yet connected by the shared rhythm of their beating hearts. Sarah Hall, driven by the momentum of her sister's words and the support of a united family, stood at the forefront of the assembly. The diary clutched in her hands was a beacon, a lighthouse guiding their vigil, a reminder of Lisa's hopes for the future. The crowd had gathered gradually, bringing warmth against the night's chill, their collective breath visible in the cool air, as soft murmurs gave way to the tranquil harmony of unity, a momentarily hushed anticipation toward one another, a preparation of voices seeking solidarity. As the opening prayer resonated across the square, reverberating over the intimate stillness, Sarah stepped forward, her voice held steady by the knowledge that she was speaking not just to those present, but to a wider audience, watching or sharing online. Tonight, we gather as a community, compelled by the lasting light of my sister Lisa, who showed us what it meant to walk this earth with courage and grace. She began, her words weaving through the gentle ripple of wind. Sarah continued, "This vigil is not only a memory, it's a seed of change, planted through her sacrifice. She believed in a world where all lives are valued equally, a vision we must nurture." From somewhere in the crowd, a spontaneous chorus began, a gentle singing that flowed through the night like a calming stream. Voices blended harmoniously, melodies crossing boundaries to exalt resilience and shared human dignity. Close to the stage, a young boy held up his candle high with the assistance of his mother, his innocent faces shadowed by the hopeful glow, eyes reflecting quiet determination. People around him bowed their heads, some wiping away unbidden tears as the vigil unfolded, each note reinforcing their vow, a promise to carry Lisa's light forward. The echoes of song were interspersed with personal anecdotes, stories of transformation, and calls for perseverance in the face of adversity. Speakers from various organizations spoke of reforms spurred by Lisa's life and called for continued participation in the fight for equity and justice. Each speech, a building block upon the foundation she so strongly stood for. Amidst serene stillness, a moment came when Sarah opened Lisa's diary, reading aloud the dreams her sister had woven in ink. The words floated in the air, crystallizing into a fierce resolve among all within earshot. Dreams are not deferred. They are ignited by those who dare to hope. To be silent is an affront. To be complacent is to betray. We must speak for those who cannot, stand for those who falter, and reach beyond our own confine. Her voice, laden with emotion, reached its crescendo, emboldened by the undeniable spirit her sister personified. The crowd swayed, murmuring in agreement, compelled by ancient winds of change, amplified through Lisa's vision, now aligning with their own. As the evening wore on, each flickering candle mirrored stars drawn close, a constellation patchwork weaving across the human lexicon. Through the exchanges of stories and songs, resolve crystallized into clarity, a shared consciousness nurtured by the unconditional conviction of togetherness. Children weaved through the crowd, the innocent guardians of tomorrow, acquainted with empathy and the strength of communal bonds. They held hands, woven together with warmth and wonder, spirits free to absorb the innocence and promise that vivid dreams presented. The vigil concluded in a chorus of silence, a soft hum pulsating across souls centered on change, a ripple transcending bodies and shadows, forging new alliances for enduring justice. As people began to leave, the night held under whispered vows. The candles guttered out one by one, but the light remained, imbued, as it was in each individual heart. In this luminous zenith of radiant narrative, Lisa's legacy persisted, sweeping through the crowd like an electrified sigh on the cusp of renewal. The sermon of unity, kindled here, carried with it the entire future of change, shaped by volunteers, solemnized by advocates, and buoyed by dreamers. From this night forward, quiet but profound, the faint glow of equality sparked hope, flickering far beyond the horizon. Across every boundary, every generational divide, and every soul brought closer to truth by one soldier's dream of a world glittering with justice. As the echoes of the vigil faded and the square emptied of mourners, the world outside their bubble of unity pressed onward. But before the night relinquished its hold, a ripple stirred amid the collective consciousness, a revelation that would veer the course of justice once more. In a dimly lit diner off a quiet Arlington street, a lone figure sat hunched over a steaming mug. The man was a shadowy silhouette, indistinct but purposeful. His presence seemed incongruous amid the mundane clatter of plates and hum of idle conversation. This was Tobias Reed, a veteran police officer retired early, now grappling with the burden of knowledge packing raw, untamed power. The photographic evidence he possessed, locked away until now, held the potential to recalibrate the investigation's trajectory regarding Lisa Hall's shooting, a truth crying out for air amongst the tangled web of distortions spun in its wake. Reed hadn't anticipated the catalyst urging him toward disclosure, but something in the unity he'd witnessed earlier, through broadcasted segments of the vigil, had stirred memories buried under layers of procedural dissension. It was this small ember inside him that he brought forth now, seeking justice long deferred. He looked up, meeting the eyes of Maya Turner, the investigative journalist whose story had begun peeling back layers around the suspect officer, Reynolds. She'd sought him out, following whispers in the wind that led through a network of retired officers and insiders wary of current entanglements obscured by brotherhood. "Maya, this isn't just hearsay," Reed began, sliding a manila envelope across the table. His voice was edged with the gravity of withheld secrets. "These are photographs and reports from 2 years back, marked confidential, buried deep by the department. They concern Officer Reynolds." Maya opened the envelope with cautious intensity, fingers probing the darkness of oversight. What she found inside was more riveting than imagined. Vividly clear images showing Reynolds engaging in questionable acts during various stops, accompanied by reports of misconduct routinely dismissed by higher-ups, prioritizing statistics over individuals. "Why didn't you come forward earlier?" Maya asked, her question lanced by curiosity and the hope that Harper's decision wasn't spurred by cynical motivations. Reed leaned back, his face shadowed by weary remorse. "You've got to understand. Coming out with it was almost impossible before. These departments close ranks tight, retaliation thick in the air. Right or wrong, I stayed quiet, played the political game, until, well," his voice lingered upon the unspoken truth so many felt. The gaze inside the Brotherhood might as easily become complicit in its silence. "About seeing that vigil tonight," Reed continued, his voice strained against an internal tide. "Something snapped. We're too far gone. and I'll not see another good soul victimized. It was time. The exchange bridged the journalist and whistleblower through an uneasy camaraderie forged by the mutual goal of unspooling injustice's spiraling pathway into light. Maya listened, choosing questions instinctively, gauging each statement's purloin value against truth's noble insistence. She knew the potential revelations carried the weight to not only impact Reynolds's case, but cast systemic shadows on jurisdictional compliance itself. "Will you testify, Reed?" Maya probed, her voice steady as she navigated the edges of this unfolding truth. Reed hesitated, but then nodded resolutely. "For Lisa's memory, and for others caught in equal crossfires, I'll do it, whatever it takes." With that pledge, a pact was sealed, a covenant that bound them both to a broader cause transcending the 9-to-5 ordains of status quo, where lives were cold numbers shuffled into reports but lacked faces and stories of untold grievance. As Reed departed, leaving Maya with material promising transformation, the weight of potential ricocheted the influence of change like fuel to a kindling fuse. The story had shifted once more, and with it emerged a dual currents of hope and urgency. It demanded recognition through legal channels, forced transparency, and insisted on reform, made visible, tangible, and eternal. Hours later, under the sanctifying cover of night, punctuated by stars newly ignited through ancestral remembrance, Maya began piecing together the implications at her office, her resolve steeled by the power of Reed's documents. She crafted a piece to be circulated with a diligence that encapsulated journalistic integrity, igniting sparks across networks primed for fresh truths merging past with present. What lay beneath those pages now fanned across consciousness, inviting all willing readers to join hands in reshaping narratives. The echo of change whispered through church bells at dawn and through the reconvening of talks, of sprouting resolutions, and vows breath-born into morrows soon to be cast. Thus the wheel of justice spun anew, its needle threading stories long confined to obscurity, stretching toward wholeness, leaving paths where unrelenting hopes marked the way with luminous momentum under skies fringed by awakening. Here, justice awaited its catalyst, ready to manifest through courage once elusive, but now resolute, salvaged within humanity's longer path toward redemptive tranquility. The courthouse was a confluence of tension and anticipation, a bastion where truth sought its seat in the halls of justice. Inside, spectators filled the benches, faces a patchwork of hope, skepticism, and determination, each person drawn here by Lisa Hall's story and the profound implications of the case. Conversations buzzed, a hum of curiosity and speculation. At the front, tables were occupied by steely-eyed attorneys, the weight of their duty palpable. On one side sat Reynolds, flanked by a legal team that wore the practiced neutrality of those accustomed to defending the indefensible. Across from them, Lisa's family sat with their own counsel, their expressions a poignant mix of grief and resolve, supported by a community willing them strength. As proceedings commenced, Judge Valerie Ross, with her stern but fair demeanor, surveyed the courtroom before addressing the assembled with the gravitas the moment necessitated. The air was charged, as everyone waited for the gavel to signal the beginning of this pivotal chapter. Today marks an important step toward unraveling the truths that lay intertwined with sorrow and rightful indignation, Judge Ross stated, setting a tone steeped in both solemnity and hope for justice's ascent. Let the proceedings begin. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Carol Franklin, opened with a passionate portrayal of Hall's life and service, painting a picture of a woman whose dedication to both her country and community was unimpeachable. Sergeant Lisa Hall exemplified valor and integrity, Franklin declared, her voice robust with advocacy. Her commitment was cut short by a sequence of unwarranted fears and judgments. Today, We seek to illuminate these events with transparency and justice. Franklin's first witness was Clara James, believing in her narrative power to humanize the details of that fateful morning. Her voice, though steady, carried the tremors of raw emotion as she recounted what she had seen, casting lived experience into the court's austere milieu. "I saw it all," Clara testified, her words a steady stream cascading over the courtroom. Lisa was moving to comply, yet she was already judged guilty in the eyes of power. Her description was vivid, a canvas broad with feelings, her clarity piercing through equivocation that might vaporize David against her earnest recollections. Wantapa left a senator, her husband a senator. They were both put to death. Next came a former colleague of Reynolds's, a man unshackled by retired status, to reveal nuances that previously languid hearts struggled to acknowledge publicly. His testimony outlined patterns, procedures, and hesitancies, drowned by inadequacies neither they nor the court dared ignore. Throughout, Reynolds sat, detached, his eyes flickering occasionally toward the gallery where Lisa's family appeared solid as granite, a facade belying the undercurrent of emotion roiling beneath. The turning point emerged with the introduction of evidence unveiled through the ex-officer Tobias Reed. His physical presence in court was a testament to courage rediscovered, and the material he delivered was unassailable. A jigsaw once marred by procedural darkness, now brought into light with immutable clarity. His testimony, supported by photographs and reports once hidden, cast Reynolds's actions within a broader pattern of misconduct, each piece corroborating the prosecution's assertions. Reed's divulgences elicited murmurs from the crowd, fragments of truth visualized and eternalized in legal discourse. The defense, adept at weaving veils of doubt, attempted to counter the narrative, emphasizing ambiguities and suggesting Reynolds's actions were in line with procedural mandates clouded by situational complexity. Yet, the penetrative arc of evidence proved an indomitable fortress, resistant to truisms, attempting undue influence. As the hearing drew toward adjournment, the tremulous edges defining the case's import became clear, a matter not only compelling for personal justice, but systemic reformation. Monumental in its scope, it carried with it the echoes of reform impacting policy directives and intercultural restraints once silenced beneath procedural layers. With the recess called, the crowd departed the courtroom with tenuous optimism, interspersed by reflective reservation, conscious that the outcome now walked a critical tightrope over a yawning chasm of societal expectation paired with individual accountability. Outside the courthouse, media outlets prepared night vignettes crafted by testimony thread snippets to ensure transparency spread beyond temporality, affirming the pursuit of recompense amid narratives long demanding illumination. At night, protest Lady Powell's O.H., the crime of adjuration. In the heart of this unfolding, Sarah Hall stood apart, surrounded by her family. An initial glance might perceive their fatigue, but beneath glimmered hope, enlivened by causes both personal and transformative. Her sister's whispers seemed to echo around her, reverberating within her consciousness, stating forthrightly, "Courage born of love transcends fear's grasp." Thus fortified, Sarah committed herself to ensuring Lisa's voice remained a guiding light amidst efforts now on course to redefine justice, catalyzing societal change inscribed forevermore within the ledger of history. What transpired within those courthouse walls would not be bottled into momentary justice to dissipate into obscurity, but would resonate perpetually across communities and hearts, ready to see retribution herald not mere closure but beginnings, unfurling through activist prisms, bearing discernible right ropes for equality to ascend. In the brightly lit courtroom, tension mounted as the trial against Officer Mark Reynolds officially began. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, every person present acutely aware of the case's significance. The gallery was packed, lines blurred between press, public supporters, and legal experts, each prepared to witness a pivotal moment in the ongoing struggle for justice. Reynolds sat with a stoic facade, but beneath the surface his resolve was porous, undermined by the damning evidence arrayed against him. Across the aisle, Lisa Hall's family sat with dignified poise, their presence both a reminder of loss and a testament to unyielding resilience. Opening arguments were set to frame the narrative, a stark depiction of the events leading to Lisa Hall's death, placing systemic prejudice and individual accountability under intense scrutiny. Carol Franklin, the prosecutor, stood with an aura of fierce determination. "We are here today because a life dedicated to service, vibrantly lived with honor and courage, was needlessly extinguished," Franklin began, her voice clear and commanding. "The evidence will show that Officer Reynolds acted with reckless disregard, driven by bias, a bias that took a mother, a daughter, a hero from this world." Her words hung in the air, painting a portrait of undeniable injustice, each brushstroke exposing an ugly truth too often ignored. The defense, led by a seasoned attorney named Richard Morris, sought to counter this narrative and recast Reynolds's actions as a tragic misjudgment rather than malicious intent. Morris exuded a quiet confidence, carefully measured against the stakes. "Officer Reynolds is a man who served faithfully, caught in an extraordinary situation," he articulated, seeking a semblance of relatability. "The evidence will show the missteps as albeit tragic but not indicative of underlying malicious intent." Throughout the trial's initial proceedings, testimonies poured forth, some familiar, others newly revealed. Maya Turner took the stand, her investigative acumen illuminating the pattern of Reynolds' misconduct. Her testimony established context that expanded beyond this single event, shaping a narrative of deeply rooted systemic flaws. "We must look no further than the patterns perpetuated in silence," Maya declared, presenting evidence bolstered by Reed's disclosures. "This isn't an isolated incident, but part of an actionable reflection on systems permissive of bias." Her reflections formed a tapestry of poignant realization, compelling those present to question broader frameworks, interlocked with personal actions under judicial scrutiny. Reynolds's defense attempted to dilute this narrative of accountability, dissecting procedures and cross-examining witnesses with determined tenacity. But what became increasingly apparent was the insistent truth of systemic injustice, no longer hidden in bureaucratic fogs, but displayed vividly in the courtroom. As the trial unfolded, tensions rose with each revelation, invoking conversations both inside and outside the courthouse. Spectators reacted to each witness, each fragment of truth, collective resolve alternating between hopeful anticipation and evaluated skepticism. Amidst this atmosphere of uncertainty, movements beyond the courthouse walls were galvanized by the trial's developments. Protests and vigils alike continued, fortified by principles now etched beyond ephemerality, a collective insistence that justice be served, realized through both legal confines and communal advocacy. Back in the courtroom, Sarah Hall remained strong under the weight of loss tempered with resolve, a daily reminder of her sister's enduring presence and legacy. She sat, hands clasped together, her mother beside her, channeling Lisa's courageous spirit, ensuring her dreams were spoken and heard anew through justice's lens, through outcomes soon to be crossed. The trial, with all its unpredictability, served as a crucial beacon, a lighthouse navigated by principles of accountability cast through myriad struggles faced by communities yet to see full reparation. Its impact would be powerful, not just for the family, but for society poised on the brink of landmark change. As proceedings concluded for the day, the sun cast long shadows across the courtroom, leaving behind whispers of hope tempered by the shadow looming over the trial. Lawyers gathered documents ready to reconstruct the narrative on new fronts, prepared for another day of vocalizing their claims. As the corridors emptied, Sarah Hall stepped outside, glancing toward a sky smoldering in hues of resilience, an ethereal remembrance of her sister standing firm in devotion. Justice, in its unyielding pursuit, demanded more than meetings and hearings. It required continuity, voices joining from all quarters to pronounce inequity untenable. That perseverance, imbued by collective righteous embers, wove resilience into every threshold, illuminating potential pathways so courageously threaded toward transformation. The day's events etched indelibly into each consciousness, a shared memorial to progress across divides once entrenched, now navigated by souls leaned into courage, a task unfinished, yet irrevocably begun. Through the heart's conviction, justice's resolve uncovered a path toward reparative truth's ascent, a beacon fueled by collective restoration, extending hands toward graces sparked by every whisper, chandeliering hope into tomorrow's inevitable dawn. The courtroom was filled with an air of anticipation as Lisa Hall's mother, Linda, prepared to take the stand. There was a silence that carried heavy weight, a reverence for the testimony she was about to give. As she settled, the room seemed to hold its breath, acknowledging the profound strength it took for a mother to recount her daughter's last days. Across from her, defense attorneys shuffled papers, attempting to displace the emotional gravity Linda carried with deliberate, comforting postures. But even their seasoned detachment faltered under the earnest dignity with which she sat. Linda Hall took her oath, her voice steady despite the undercurrent of emotion that subtended her words. She possessed a gentle fortitude, strengthened by her determination to remind everyone present of the humanity transcending the legal discourse. Mrs. Hall, could you share with us your last conversations with Lisa? Assistant District Attorney Carol Franklin asked, her tone respectful, aware of the path they'd tread. Linda nodded, drawing a deep breath. Lisa called me the evening before she was taken from us. She spoke about coming home soon, how she would finally take the leave she kept putting off. We laughed about things, her sharing stories from her unit, their camaraderie. Her voice wavered, catching the tender edges of memory, but she pressed on, her composure intact through sheer will. She promised that when she returned, we'd celebrate properly, not just birthdays or forgotten anniversaries, but life itself. The room shifted, a ripple of understanding passing through it. Eyes mirrored sympathy, recognizing the agonizing truth of promises unfulfilled, lives interrupted by violence's capricious hand. Franklin moved closer slightly, softening her approach, not probing, but inviting Linda's narrative to flow more freely. What else did she share about her work, her hopes? Lisa loved her work, Linda continued, recalling the heart of Lisa's dedication. She believed in the power of her role, to protect and serve, to make lives better. She hoped for a day when her service wouldn't just bridge gaps, but erase them. She often said, "Mom, don't worry, there's a day coming when who we are won't dictate what we can be." Those words seemed to hover in the air, a reminder of Lisa's idealism, a thread weaving through the trial, urging understanding beyond mere judgment. Reynolds sat across, his eyes fixed upon the table. The reality of his actions rendered increasingly complex. Lisa's family had become more than spectral figures across a courtroom. They were flesh and blood, living, breathing embodiments of the person whose life he had irrevocably altered. As the testimony continued, Linda shared personal anecdotes, stories tinged with warmth, painted in hues of both joy and sadness. Her delivery was sincere, transforming Lisa from a faceless name into a vibrant soul whose aspirations and humanity transcended any narrative spun by defense retorts. In her words lay woven threads of resilience and glimpses of a future unfairly truncated. The court absorbed Lisa through Linda's maternal grace, envisioned anew by memory's artful lens. When Franklin concluded her questioning, allowing Linda's story to air without further burden, the room was alive with unspoken solidarity, a recognition of shared humanity in tragedy and hope. As the defense rose for cross-examination, the dynamic shifted. Morris approached cautiously, intent on maintaining the decorum demanded by this sensitive intersection. "Mrs. Hall, thank you for sharing Lisa's essence with us," he began, acknowledging her testimony's deeply personal nature. No further questions. His decision was strategic, a nod to the courtroom's current empathetic tenor, avoiding potential backlash from appearing disproportionate in the face of such genuine recollection. Linda descended from the stand, accompanied by the quiet respect of the gallery. In that moment, the courtroom's atmosphere transcended into something not just judicial, but unanimously human. Sarah and John Hall embraced Linda tightly, the trial's often clinical depersonalization torn away by a mother's voice imparting clarity. A profound stillness followed, the weight of police authority juxtaposed against the personal anguish jurisdiction couldn't solder into policy. Her testimony, more than cathartic release, was an invocation for quiet revolutions nurtured through every whispered assurance, thriving on unity. The jurors had absorbed more than information. Within them lay the power to interpret the truth, context, and consequence gleaned from human experiences shared. They faced an unenviable task, rendering judgment in light of the quantitative and qualitative alike. As court adjourned for the day, footsteps echoed through the marbled halls, carrying with them the sediment of justice's continuous path. It was a journey unfurling, stitched by voices poured into memory's quilt, sustained by legacies of those who defied fatalism's threshold. Outside, a symphony of hope resounded, the world watching and listening as Lisa Hall's narrative transfigured within this enclave into enduring spirit, a call to action undimmed by bureaucratic delineation. As dusk threaded through the city, casting it into shades of night, the Hall family remained united, their steps synchronized by voices arising through the storm, carrying the promise of tomorrow whispered within justice's luminary embrace. In the corridors of the Pentagon, the air was charged with a determined energy. The military's response to the shooting of Sergeant Lisa Hall had grown beyond statements and sentiments. It had become a catalyzing force for profound introspection and action, urging a new path that held the promise of transformative justice. U.S. Army General Michael Thompson walked briskly through the halls, his presence commanding respect and attention. His mission was clear: to ensure that the Army's response to Lisa's tragic death was not only swift but systemic, addressing the root causes within their own ranks that might echo the biases and prejudices observed in civilian sectors. Meeting rooms were abuzz with conversations as officers, legal experts, and strategy coordinators convened. Colonel Martha Eagles and Major Sean Bradley were among those leading discussions, their leadership pivotal to navigating the reformative journey. "This isn't just about addressing one incident," Eagles stated, her voice carrying the weight of conviction. "We have to scrutinize ourselves, our training methods, and our partnership protocols to ensure that going forward, service members are protected, not just physically but in terms of their dignity and rights." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of fellow officers who mirrored her resolve. Eagles had always been a voice of reform, pushing boundaries to ensure the military's values aligned with societal justice. Now her vision was crystallizing into concrete steps. "The Army must be a beacon of integrity," Bradley added. "We can't afford to lose trust, not among our soldiers, nor in the communities we serve. This requires changes at every level." Their strategy outlined a comprehensive approach. It included revisiting joint training sessions with law enforcement agencies, emphasizing cultural sensitivity and anti-bias education. These sessions would be grounded in real-world scenarios aimed at dismantling prejudices before they could manifest into tragedies like Lisa's. Moreover, the proposal included creating panels composed of both military and civilian representatives who would oversee interactions, ensuring transparency and accountability. These panels would be tasked with bridging any remaining divides and fostering mutual respect. "We'll also intensify our internal dialogues," Eagles declared, tapping into the ethos of collective responsibility. "By fostering an open culture where issues can be raised without fear, we strengthen our integrity from within." The commitment to this direction required unanimity, and the gravity of their decisions permeated every discussion. Thompson knew that leadership needed to model change, not just through rhetoric, but through visible, measurable actions. Let's also focus on highlighting diversity within our ranks, he added, grounding their initiatives in inclusivity. Empower those from minority backgrounds to assume leadership roles where their perspectives can shape a more equitable future. With these resolutions in place, the military's message transcended beyond the immediate need to resolve this tragedy. It became an oath, a promise of continual growth and learning, a beacon to lead by example in an often fractured world. As consensus coalesced into action, press units were mobilized to disseminate the Army's comprehensive plan to the public, ensuring transparency in their commitment. Open forums were scheduled where civilians could engage with military leaders, sharing thoughts, concerns, and hopes for this new trajectory. Back in Arlington, these developments were met with a wave of cautious optimism. The Hall family, aware of the military's initiatives, felt a measure of solace that Lisa's legacy was igniting change beyond the trial, fueling a movement poised to redefine the intersection of race, duty, and justice. Sarah Hall, informed of these measures, shared them with the community, fostering dialogue about the future and how Lisa's life had become a catalyst for systemic progress. The impact was palpable, bridging worlds once distanced by uniform and career, personalizing efforts into shared resolve. Through media outlets, town hall meetings, and every ripple created by these initiatives, echoes of Lisa's dream spread beyond confines, a dream that justice aligned with equality, nurtured by hearts committed to restoring faith in institutions meant to protect them. And so the Pentagon's halls echoed a new anthem, a vibrant hum of change, challenging every officer to champion a cause beyond jurisdiction, fostering the promise of the light that must guide every service member, community, and heart toward unity in a world courageously mended by empathy's touch. Justice was finding its course, not solely through courtrooms, but through oaths remembered and rekindled, defining futures where no voice would be silenced, no hope deferred, and dreams belonging to all realized beyond the horizons of yesterday. The streets of Arlington vibrated with intensity as the city braced itself for the latest in a series of protests, a living heart pulsing with passion and resistance, set against a backdrop of political maneuvering and unrelenting demands for justice. As evening approached, thousands gathered, each individual carrying the weight of history and the hope for a better future, converging into a river of resolve. This demonstration was more than an outcry. It was a tapestry of human resilience, each face in the crowd representing stories interwoven through shared experiences of injustice. Civilians and soldiers, activists and artists, parents and children, each stood united by a common cause, their voices rising to challenge an establishment long unyielding, yet now stirred to change. Raucous chants echoed through the urban canyons, reverberating against concrete and steel, audible testaments to the pain and power of collective voices. Justice for Lisa, justice for all. The chorus became a relentless mantra, driving forward the thousands gathered, hearts pounding in rhythm with drums and high hopes. At the forefront, Sarah Hall stood shoulder to shoulder with her comrades in this journey, surrounded by familiar faces that formed a protective shield around her. The march had become a pilgrimage of sorts, a walking testament to Lisa's indomitable spirit, a memory personified in motion. But as the crowd pushed its way toward the seat of local government, a focal point for policy and protest, a palpable ripple, unseen but instinctively felt, surged through their ranks. Tension thickened in the air, an invisible barrier challenging the solidarity that had brought them here. Within moments, their path was obstructed by a line of riot police, a visual reminder that old tensions, unresolved by courts or commissions, still simmered under the clamoring for change. Shields glinted ominously under streetlights, an armored wall standing in stark opposition to the march's unified progress. The initial confrontation was tacit, a standoff, vibrating with pent-up momentum. Protesters and police eyed each other across an unheard gulf, two forces reflecting back a mirrored urgency, one for reform, the other for control. Sarah felt the weight of the moment start to fracture under the anticipatory static. She knew the march had been peaceful, but the potential for volatility simmered in the air. She glanced at Reverend Malcolm Jenkins standing a few paces over and nodded. It was time to act. Rising above the crowd, Reverend Jenkins moved forward, arms raised in a gesture of peace and intelligence. His voice rolled forward with the authority of someone used to breaching walls of doubt with eloquence and purpose. "My brothers and sisters," he declared, a voice imbued with resonant urgency, "we come here not as combatants, but as seekers of truth. Let us remember what brings us together. This is not only about resistance, but about reconciliation." The Reverend's words acted as a balm, reaching through the charged atmosphere to touch each person. Behind the lines of riot police, an officer, possibly unaccustomed to dialogue that didn't initiate in shouting, blinked with unexpected attentiveness. Sarah seized the moment. Stepping forward, she echoed the call for unity. "We stand here tonight in memory of my sister, Sergeant Lisa Hall. Her life was given in service to a country she believed could change. Let us honor her by showing the world we can stand strong and together, even in the face of distrust." With these words, the crowd united, shoulders set, hearts stronger. Their chants turned into a song, a melody of shared purpose, woven from the different voices of a diverse America, rallying for dreams long deferred, yet unbowed by cynicism or fear. The line of police faltered for a moment, an eddy, driven by a shared heartbeat, as vibrations of Washington's proclamations filtered into their perimeter. Some instinctively lowered their shields, curious eyes meeting those of once feared adversaries. It wasn't unheard of, but opportunities for genuine understanding amidst such dynamics were rare. Then, amidst this evolving moment, a ripple of misunderstanding flared, a projectile thrown, breaking the soft silence. It flew not from within the crowds, but from an unseen figure at the periphery, yet blame ricocheted indiscriminately. Leaders of the march responded swiftly. Unified calls for calm arose from within the crowd, quieting mutters before escalation could take root. Quick to reassure, Sarah rallied her own resolve, channeling the peace she maintained through remembered whispers of her sister. "Let us not be provoked. Our path is clarity, not conflict." Her voice rang clear, buoyed by reverberating freedom anew. Lisa's legacy would not be defined by reaction, but proactive love. Tension eased as the crowd restabilized, their ultimate commitment burning stronger than impulse. It fortified them against division, proving that discord would not carve new wounds amidst this call for change. In the span of these moments, the march persisted, the crowd stepping in unison once more, carrying torches of accountability and resolve to the walls of deliberation's seat, their faith restored in purpose and unity. As night deepened, but passions burgeoned, the streets of Arlington lit with the vibrancy of change, powered by those unwavering in belief that their voice, rising from a chorus of mourning and triumph, would sow seeds for yet unopened futures. Lisa Hall's enduring testimony bore within it an inexorable power, guiding their steps along pathways, rivers of hope imbued with compassion, standing against fear's siren call and pledging to cradle change as they moved into the illuminated horizons of tomorrow's plea for justice achieved. After the break, Lisa Hall's residual impact drew Lisa on down the North Pole Road in Elmo and Lisa, Texas. The time for someone told Dunnett that the hearings at the home professors were imperative. Lisa. The courtroom was dense with anticipation as the trial approached its pivotal moment. The verdict was imminent, and the nation seemed to hold its collective breath, awaiting a decision that would reverberate far beyond the walls of justice. With every seat filled and nerves taut, the air was charged with a blend of hope and apprehension, a palpable current of impending consequence. Lisa Hall's family sat in solemn unity, hands clasped together, offering each other a shared strength that transcended the silent confines of the room. Their presence was both a reminder of personal loss and a testament to an enduring fight for justice, a cause woven into the fabric of their lives since that fateful day. As Judge Valerie Ross entered, her demeanor was composed, carrying the weight of what this moment represented, not just for Lisa's family, but for a society grappling with the scales of justice hanging in precarious balance. "All rise," the bailiff intoned, the collective shuffle resonating like a final breath drawn before destiny was revealed. The courtroom complied, a blend of quiet respect and tense anticipation etched on every face. Once seated, Judge Ross began, her voice a measured cadence. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered today to deliver a verdict on a case that mirrors more than just the events in question. It reflects the depth and complexity of our shared values and obligations as a society." In the hush that followed, all eyes turned to the jury box, where 12 individuals sat poised, the weight of their deliberations bearing down upon them. Each juror held expressions marked by the gravity of their responsibility, reflecting the myriad narratives this trial had encompassed. The foreperson, an elder gentleman with a dignified presence, rose, clutching the verdict slip. His voice was calm yet firm, steadied by the conviction that their decision had been reached through vigorous, fair-minded discourse. "In the case of the state versus Officer Mark Reynolds," he began, "we find the defendant guilty of manslaughter." A collective exhale rippled through the courtroom as the words settled in, their import sinking deeply into the consciousness of all present. Guilty, a word laden with accountability, a moment branded into the timeline of Lisa's life and beyond. The Hall family, emotions flowed freely, a bittersweet release merging triumph with the ever-present ache of absence. Tears slid down Sarah's cheeks, her hand finding her mother's as they embraced, the verdict an acknowledgement of Lisa's dignity and value, even in death. Across the room, Reynolds sat motionless, his demeanor subdued, the reality of his position soaking into the silence that followed. His defense team conferred quietly beside him, understanding full well the ramifications stretching ahead, a pathway burdened by choices now judged under the law's scrutinous eye. Judge Ross nodded solemnly, acknowledging the jury's painstaking effort to reach a fair conclusion. "The verdict delivered today is not merely a reflection of culpability. It represents a broader call for introspection and reform. It is our collective responsibility to ensure such tragedies do not recur." Her words resonated with a clarity that spanned the room, threading through the ether, binding them together within a shared quest for societal betterment. As proceedings drew to a close, media outlets poised outside the courthouse, cameras rolling to broadcast the resolution to an awaiting world. Their lenses captured the humanity behind the headlines, a unified resolve standing testament to far-reaching implications yet to be written. Exiting into the cool embrace of evening, the Hall family was met with a surge of reporters and supporters, voices buzzing with questions and praise. Sarah, stepping into a new role as her sister's torchbearer, paused, ready to speak on behalf of a movement galvanized by her family's unflinching stand. "This verdict is a step," she declared, her voice steady despite the tremor of emotion. "It honors Lisa's legacy and sends a clear message that justice can prevail. But our journey doesn't end here. We must continue to advocate for change within systems that perpetuate inequality." Applause and cheers met her words, an echo of determination that rose to meet the call resonating within crowded hearts, promising a future carved by unity and hope. In the days and weeks to come, the verdict ignited conversations far and wide, inspiring dialogues across cities and communities, reaffirming a commitment to reform fueled by faith in accountability. Lisa Hall's legacy endured, a clarion call remembered not just for its tragedy, but for the unifying power grounded within each shared step toward justice, a tapestry of triumphs and trials anchored to liberty's resolute embrace. Her story, undimmed by shadows, guided the hands of all who dared dream in the name of tomorrow's dawn, a beacon born from loss but crafted into light, illuminating pathways seeded with dreams where justice would forever dwell. The fallout from the verdict resonated across the nation, a powerful wave that stirred reactions both expected and unprecedented. In communities from bustling metropolises to rural enclaves, people gathered to discuss, debate, and digest what the jury's decision represented, not just for Lisa Hall's family, but for the broader tapestry of American society, grappling with the persistent specter of racial injustice. In Arlington, the atmosphere was one of mixed emotions. News outlets published stories that transcended the specifics of the trial, delving into deeper examinations of systemic inequities. The conversation spilled into households, schools, and workplaces, igniting a collective introspection about the paths toward equity and the roles each individual might play in navigating those paths. Town halls brimmed with spirited dialogue as community leaders and citizens engaged in earnest discussions. These forums, once buzzing with polarized opinions, evolved into thoughtful exchanges about reforming policing policies, enhancing community oversight, and instituting more rigorous bias training within law enforcement agencies. In addition, one such meeting was held at a local community center, where the walls were adorned with artwork and photographs of civil rights movements past and present, a visual lineage connecting the struggles of yesterday with today's ongoing journey. Sarah Hall stood at the lectern, embodying a bridge between memory and action. Her role had grown from familial advocate to a leading voice in the movement for systemic change. Galvanized by her sister's legacy, she spoke with the clarity and passion of someone who had been forged in the crucible of profound personal loss, but saw beyond pain into possibility. "Lisa's story is our story," she addressed the assembly, her voice carrying the weight of her sister's dreams and convictions. "Her legacy calls upon us to rise and reshape the world we inherited, one where each life matters equally, where justice knows no prejudice." Her words were met with nods and a smattering of applause from those gathered, an audience diverse in background yet unified in purpose. Among them were civic leaders, teachers, students, and individuals from law enforcement, each present out of a shared commitment to foster understanding and progress. At the meeting, proposals were laid out, concrete ideas mirroring the spirit of reform Lisa had championed, establishing independent review boards for police conduct, increasing funding for community programs, and creating educational initiatives that focused on empathy and inclusive histories. As these suggestions were debated, the group collectively acknowledged the complexity of change, recognizing that meaningful progress would require sustained effort and collaboration. A plan began to emerge, one that emphasized not just reactive measures, but proactive strategies for cultivating trust and equity. While the meeting continued beyond the community center's walls, the echoes of change were taking hold. Social media was alight with discussions, tagged with phrases like "Justice for Lisa" and "Hope for Tomorrow," a digital testament to the movement's reach, one unbounded by geography and fueled by the collective human conscience. Students in schools composed essays on the subject of justice. Church sermons reflected upon the power of unity through adversity. Artists conceptualized murals depicting scenes of harmony and resilience, all signs that the narrative of change had transcended mere dialogue, enshrining Lisa's impact within cultural consciousness. Even within governmental circles, where conversations were typically filtered through layers of bureaucracy, the verdict prompted lawmakers to consider legislative reform aimed at addressing systemic racism. Statutes were drafted, evolving through rigor and debate, each word echoing the aspirations of those committed to tangible reform. The conclusion of the trial marked not an end, but a phase in a continuum of justice, a bridge joining past to future, where progress was kindled by those unwilling to let the past merely repeat itself, but chose instead to reform it anew. And so the ripples of the verdict expanded, touching lives far removed from Arlington, rippling across divisions, igniting flames of courage and compassion that spread wider than any could have foreseen. Elisa Hall's life and death transcended the confines of tragedy to become a canvas for change, painted with the courage of a community united by shared hopes, dreams, and the unassailable belief that justice and equality were not mere ideals to be chased, but truths to be firmly grasped, held, and rooted in the soil of human determination. Through tears and triumphs, wounds and wisdom, the spirit of the verdict resounded, a clarion call heralding the dawn of a just world, one brought closer through the collective journey of many standing as one, daring to dream, in colors only unity could reveal. The verdict's impact was profound, a revelation challenging hearts and systems to weave new paths, etched with love, fortitude, and an unyielding commitment to a world where every voice sang in harmony, much like a torch in humanity's evolving narrative, a testament to hope never ceasing. As the days turned to weeks, the fervor and resolve set in motion by Lisa Hall's tragic death and the subsequent verdict settled into a quieter, contemplative rhythm. The nation continued its journey, now deeply introspective, examining the fault lines exposed by the incident and seeking ways to bridge them with a compassion that transcended divisions. In Arlington, the once boisterous streets were now paths walked with renewed purpose. The collective soul of the community had absorbed the lessons learned, its people moving knowingly toward incremental but significant change, keeping the memory of Lisa as their guiding light. A commemoration was held in Arlington's Central Park, an event designed to reflect, celebrate, and unify those touched by Lisa's story. The park, alive with whispers of the breeze, was adorned with vibrant displays of flowers and banners, each imbued with messages of hope and remembrance. Families, friends, and strangers intertwined in shared resolve gathered around a newly erected monument. Its design was elegant, a simple stone structure etched with words that encapsulated Lisa's essence and the movement her life had sparked. A soldier's boots and dog tags were sculpted with profound authenticity, honoring her legacy alongside inscriptions that read, "Courage, Justice, Change." Sarah Hall, standing beside the monument, felt the dusk's embrace as she surveyed the impact of their journey, a journey that began with loss but had transformed into a beacon of communal triumph and progress. Taking her place at the podium, Sarah addressed the gathered crowd, her voice imbued with the depth of her twin roles as both sister and advocate. "We gather here tonight not only to remember Lisa, but to carry forth her legacy," she began, the twilight accentuating the sincerity etched into her expressions. She dreamt of a brighter world, a world where justice aligns with equality and understanding bridges division. Her words resonated through the crowd, each syllable a stitch in the fabric of their collective promise. This was more than a gathering, it was a renewal, a vow to sustain the change ignited within them. As the evening progressed, candles were lit, their flickering flames weaving a shimmering constellation across the park. Each flame represented a promise to continue Lisa's mission, a commitment to nurturing a world where justice was not confined by biased constructs, but was boundless, accessible to all. Reverend Jenkins, standing beside Sarah, offered a prayer of unity and purpose, underscoring the shared humanity binding them together in this pivotal moment of reflection and renewal. Following the prayer, a string of speakers, including community leaders and activists, shared their visions for moving forward, offering insights and commitments grounded in the legacy Lisa left behind. The atmosphere was poignant, laced with a sense of accomplishment and the recognition that their journey, though arduous, was bearing fruit. Progress was tangible, felt in reforms, whispered through legislative corridors, spoken in classrooms, pulsed through communities like life-sustaining currents. The gathering concluded with a collective chant, a harmonious proclamation that echoed through the park and beyond. Lisa's light leads us, justice for all. As people began to disperse, their footsteps gentle against the earth beneath them, they carried with them the echoes of the day's reflections, a commemorative guide to lives ready to embrace change. Sarah lingered a moment longer beside the monument, her eyes tracing the familiar shapes representing her sister's life. She whispered softly, a promise carried by a breeze, touched by night's approach. "We will continue, Lisa. Your dreams will be fulfilled." Above, the stars emerged one by one, each a reminder that even amidst darkness, light persists. It was a symbolic tableau, a promise of continuity that stretched beyond the confines of individual experience. Lisa Hall's legacy had transcended reality, becoming more than a story. Her impact was an ongoing narrative of heart-tethered justice. In reflection, the journey of one soldier had given rise to a chapter of history, infused with the belief that justice was not a destination, but a continuous pursuit. As the night deepened, Arlington, and indeed the world beyond, was a testament to possibility, carrying forward the torch of change, destined to light paths yet to be charted. In this tapestry of enduring commitment, Lisa's light shone brilliantly, a beacon guiding many toward a horizon where dreams met destiny and justice knew no bounds. What will you do to ensure justice prevails in your community? If Lisa's story moved you, like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that drive change.